stole from me the other day by accident. Yes.
Read all these lists.
How many letters do you have?
3.
They asked, they were submitted for the record.
What?
If they were submitted for the record.
Then yes.
Right, you think she has to read them all in?
Yeah, I would.
Do you want a water?
What's that?
Do you want a water?
No.
You're good.
A political activist down Liberty Drive.
Oh, thank you so much.
Claims he's disabled, so he can't come to the meetings, and he submits comments all the time. They're always nasty comments about elected officials. But one city down in Detroit refused to read it, and so they got sued. And the trial court of appeals said, "Yeah, he's right. He's got a disability. You got to read his comment."
I'm gonna switch some things around. Put this up here. Yeah, we're gonna do this one first. Okay, welcome everyone to the Salem Township Planning Commission meeting, May 18th, 2026. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:32. If you'll please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's do roll call.
Yes, please.
Bennett? Here. Kahn? Here. Ross? Here. Huntsman here. Lewandowski? Here. McLaughlin?
Excused.
Merlot?
Here. Okay. Approval of the agenda. I would like to suggest that we move the public hearing for the rural uses text amendment and the rural use, move that up in front of the KCE.
I'll second.
All those in favor of adjusting the agenda and moving the public hearing for the rural uses text amendment up in front of the public hearing and the KCE conditional use and site plan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Public comment. So we'll start our public comment with anything that is not on the agenda, because we have a public hearing for both of those items. So is there any public comment that is not related to the two items on the new business items? None? Chairperson comment? Welcome, it's nice to see everybody. New business items. Do we have, Paul, did you want to do just kind of a brief, very brief?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you a real quick overview. So, as you know, we have been working on text amendments to the zoning ordinance as they relate to rural land uses, including updates to definitions, the permitted use table, fence requirements, things related to kennels and nurseries and a variety of things to ensure that the requirements in the ordinance were both in line with the community's vision, the regulations that we really wanted to see to make sure we were protecting those, allowing for those uses, but also protecting for neighboring uses. And then ultimately just kind of cleaning that up to make sure that there weren't any kind of ambiguities with our requirements and the Right to Farm Act. So what you have in front of you is the culmination of, I think, months of work that you all put into looking at this and refining it. So I don't think there's really any significant changes from the last time. There were a couple of things that you asked us to tweak. We would suggest that it would be ready for a recommendation to the township board at this point.
Do we have a motion to open the public hearing for the rural uses text amendment?
I make a motion to open the public hearings for the rural use tax amendment.
Second.
All those in favor of opening the public hearing for the rural uses text amendment, open at 7:32, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. Okay, public hearing is open. Comment?
What is it? What is the text like?
We're revising some of the verbiage and updating for our rural uses. We're an agricultural community. Some of the stuff was confusing, some of it wasn't even right. It was a cleanup to make sure that we're supporting our rural community and they have, not inhibiting them in any way, and ensuring we're applying the Right to Farm Act in compliance with all of that stuff. So we've talked about it probably about 4 times. So we think we've got it right. If we don't, we'll fix it. Okay. No one? Okay.
Is there, do you have has the language been published anywhere, the edited language?
It's been in every posting, every packet for when it was at the meetings. So yes, it's been posted out there. And it'll be open, it'll be, once it's posted again for the it has to go to the board.
Yeah, so the process is the planning commission holds a public hearing, makes a recommendation to the township board, who has the ultimate authority to approve text amendments to the zoning ordinance. Once if the board approves it, they will have to publish a notice in the newspaper. They won't publish the entirety of it, but they'll let you know that it's available, and you can always come up and look at it at the township hall.
So you can come to the township hall and look at it.
And this packet is online, so you should be able to review it at home if you'd like as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We close it? Should we close the public hearing?
Oh, I didn't know we opened. I make a motion to close the public hearing for May 18th, 2026 on the rural, public hearing rural use text amendments.
7:39?
Yes.
Good idea. Okay.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor of closing the public hearing for rural uses text amendment? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, okay. Public hearing is closed. We've talked about it 4 times. I think we've got it all together. In the packet, talked about agricultural processing, kennels, farm products, greenhouses, commercial versus residential, all those kinds of things. So just the rural uses in our community. The reason we spent so much time on it is because we wanted to get it right, because we are a rural community and we want to support our farmers, because there are not many left. Okay, so anybody have any questions on that? No? No. Okay. So we have, let's see, some options.
Okay, make a motion to recommend to the Township Board to adopt proposed zoning ordinance, text amendments to update regulations for fences, permitted use, certificate use standards, zoning improve related to rural use with the following changes. No changes,
As submitted.
as submitted.
Do we have a second?
Second. A second.
Oh, we already have a second, but thank you. Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Bennett?
Aye.
Khan? Aye. Ross?
Yes.
Huntsman? Yes. Lewandowski?
Yes.
Merlot?
Yes.
Six in favor.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moving on to the big show. Okay, do we have, well, first of all, Paul, would you like to give the motion passes. Would you like to move on to the KCE 1, 2, 3? We have a lot of people here.
Okay. Brief overview. This is for, the applicant submitted a request for approval for a conditional use permit and a site plan approval for a battery energy storage facility at 6709 East Joy Road. This is a 10-acre portion of that larger parcel. The 10-acre portion is immediately across from the substation on Tower Road that you're probably all familiar with if you're familiar with that area. The township did pass a compatible renewable energy ordinance a couple years ago, which governs the development and approval process for such a proposed development. The site is located in an agricultural residential zoning district. You've got our report in front of you, shows that the surrounding land uses generally are agricultural uses, either farm fields or large lot residential, and of course the substation that I just mentioned. The site plan itself does appear to meet all of the requirements, the bulk requirements as far as setback and density requirements. They have provided a site plan that shows the circulation pattern, an existing area where they will initially have the battery units themselves, and then an expansion field, as well as a substation on that site to convert the energy before it goes into the batteries and before it goes back onto the grid. In general, the major concerns that are identified with a use like this have to do with noise, light, potential pollution issues. Many of you were here for the presentation that the applicants gave a month or so ago that kind of went into great detail on many of those things. So we have reviewed the ordinance in terms of the land use standards, the specific use standards, which they generally appear to be addressing, though we are referring to the township engineer's report to address things like noise. There was a plume analysis for potential contaminants from a fire. And so our engineer is here and he can speak to some of those things. But as far as parking goes, there are no real day-to-day kind of employees there, so it's not going to be a big intensity use from people coming and going. I think it's just people that would come to service the site. It's our understanding that this is remotely monitored 24 hours a day. There are no issues with lighting. They have provided substantial landscaping around the perimeter of the site to screen the use from view. We are still suggesting that we want to see at least sample elevations of what that substation component might look like and how tall that might be and how that would effectively be screened. So that may be something you want to ask the applicant about. And then finally, because this is a conditional use, There are the conditional use standards that you would review any conditional use against. So I would encourage you at your time for discussion to go through those and use that as a guide for your review, and ultimately whether you're going to approve this or postpone with the need for additional information to help you answer those questions. As I said, our engineer's here too. I don't know, Majid, do you want to give a brief overview of the engineering report?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Stantec reviewed the plans of the site plan, and also we reached out to subject matter experts within the company for the noise analysis and as well as the plume analysis. That's kind of the critical part of this review for us, and they have provided a couple memos addressing the components for the noise as well as a plume analysis from a fire. These were shared with Anne, that she shared with the applicant, and if I have any questions about that, I can try to address them. I'm not an environmental engineer I'm just a civil engineer, but we do have experts that we can bring in, if the applicant has any questions about those reports that we generated from our folks in other offices outside of Michigan.
Jim, did you want to give a brief overview of any findings or questions?
So obviously we work with our consultant, Stantec.
Okay.
For that.
So that's included?
That is a joint memo from
Oh,
us
okay, okay,
and Stantec.
okay. And we can ask our questions after the public hearing. So, okay. And then generally, we like to hear from the applicant. I think, Brian, did you send an email, like a Saturday or something like that? Maybe instead of going through, like I know you mentioned like a 45-minute program, but maybe hit some of the highlights and, the basics, here's what it is, here's why we picked this place, and then I think some of the safety aspects and the most common questions, to kind of get the basics to everyone.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for making some time to be here with us this evening. My name is Brian Madigan. I'm a project developer with Key Capture Energy. And we're excited to introduce you all to our proposed battery energy storage projects here in Salem Township. Go ahead, Brian. There we go. Okay, so I will try and speed things along here. But just as an introduction to our team that's here this evening, I've got Joel Viduna, who's our Executive Vice President of our Commercial and Technology teams, Chris Linsmeyer from our Public Affairs team, Evan Balcom is a fireman and fire protection consultant with Fire and Risk Alliance. And then we've got Wayne Sikora, who is the engineer of record. He's a licensed civil engineer here in Michigan. He designed our site plan. And also Mike Boat, who is our local counsel. I will skip this slide and go specifically to why we chose this particular project site. And so you can see there's a lot going on here. It's a pretty busy slide, but the driver here is Coventry Substation. Coventry Substation is a major electrical hub on Michigan's regional transmission grid. It helps move power at the bulk power supply level across the state. And so a battery energy storage project at this particular location is really complementary and I think consistent use given the presence of that substation that's already there. If you think about, it's sort of akin to a major highway interchange. That substation acts as a point of connection for federal highway system, state highway system. You want to put infrastructure that can benefit from that nearby, and so that's what this battery energy storage project will do. Just to mention here, in terms of our proximity to neighbors, some of you may know that we initially had cited our project on the project just to the north of us, but we came to understand that actually the location that we are now was still available for development, even though the rest of the parcel is now in a perpetual farmland conservation easement. This particular 10 acres is not. So we were able to work with the township to better understand that, and we're able to make an adjustment to get even farther away from the neighbors to the north. So you can see the closest residence along Spring Hill Drive is 1,900 feet, and then our former landowner is about 1,000 feet to the north. This is just a bird's eye kind of aerial view of the project site to highlight, you can see the extensive vegetative screening that we will provide on all 4 sides of the project, with the most robust screening along Tower Road. And then, just kind of taking into account again the Coventry substation, which is 12 acres, and our project site, which is 10 acres. This is our landscaping plan. We will be planting deciduous trees as well as evergreens, a mix of shrubs, and native pollinator-friendly grasses. That'll help ensure that as the vegetation matures, and I guess worth mentioning that at the time of planting, the trees will need to be, I think, 6 to 8 feet tall. So there will be immediate screening upon that vegetative buffer going in. And again, all native plants and species, native trees, native shrubs, to complement the kind of surrounding rural landscape. As you came in, you might have seen we have prepared some visual renderings that show the existing and proposed conditions. This one here is looking north along Joy, from the intersection of Joy and Tower Road. I think, from this distance, the proposed conditions, all you can really see is, once the project is constructed, is the extensive vegetative screening that we'll be putting in. This visual rendering here is from Spring Meadow Lane. We're facing southeast. I recognize this is just one particular location, but I think what's important here is the distance from those residences at 1,900 feet away is significant, to where there's intervening topography, other trees, vegetative screening. Your proposed views from that neighborhood toward the project site, once the project is constructed, are not going to significantly change as a result of our project. And then this photo here, the proposed conditions, we're looking west from the driveway at Coventry Substation straight into the project area. Really all you can see is the extensive vegetation. And those renderings, it's worth mentioning, vegetation is based on the actual size and perspective of what that tree growth or shrub growth might look like. So it's a rather accurate rendering of what the site will look like once the vegetation and project are fully built out. So Paul kind of mentioned this in terms of land use compatibility, but our landowner owns about 134 acres there, the parent parcel. Our project represents about 8% of that total property area. And so I know for Salem Township, farmland and agricultural preservation is a key component of your master plan. And so what's nice about what our landowner has done, he has conserved the balance of his property, 116 acres, in a perpetual farmland conservation easement. So I think that really speaks to the project recognizing that important goal of the township and ensures that farmland will be protected in perpetuity. It's also notable, as Paul mentioned, that the compatible renewable energy ordinance that the township adopted expressly permits battery energy storage projects in this particular zoning district. So much like the substation directly across the street, we kind of act as an extension of that. Both are allowed uses in this particular zone. It's also worth mentioning the project will not require any water, sewer, or other public services to function. And this map here just demonstrates the extensive conservation that local residents have already engaged in. Our neighbors to the east, the Fishbecks, have put their property into a farmland conservation easement, as well as the southwest. And so again, just really recognizing the townships and you as local residents are prioritizing that preservation. And so when you look at this extensive preservation effort in comparison to the small footprint of our project, I think it speaks to a balance in meeting the desire for growth where it makes sense, right across the street from a large substation, and then conserving farmland as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Joel to talk about noise.
Hello, Commissioners. Good to see you all again. So I know when we presented before, we spoke extensively about noise. We spoke about the volume of noise, frequency, pitch, and tone. And so the purpose of today is just to get a little bit of recap of that, and then also speak to how we address the city engineer's concerns. So as a little bit of recap, Salem Township does have a maximum of 55 decibel at the nearest non-participating dwelling sound ordinance. When we model that, there's a ISO, International Standards Organization standard, that dictates how that gets done for us and any other project that needs a noise model. And if you look at the right of this slide, that shows where we ended up, where if the batteries are operating at 100% duty cycle, so that means full blast, at the nearest dwelling, we are just less than 51 decibels, which puts you somewhere between like a conversation or a refrigerator. But in any case, 4 decibels lower than the ordinance at the nearest non-participating dwelling. So, as we mentioned before, for properly sited projects, like the 14 that we have operating in this one, we just do not get noise complaints. And a lot of that is because they are not very loud, and then we talked a lot about how the pitch and the tone don't tend to be the types of pitches and tones that are annoying, like a whistle or like a subwoofer. So not very high, not very low, somewhere in the middle. Nonetheless, you all have requested that we do noise testing to kind of confirm this once the project is up and running, and we have agreed to that. So with that being said, Stantec did provide a memo on our noise study after they reviewed it, and they had some really good questions. We did provide a memo to Stantec, as they mentioned earlier, but I want to go over some of the issues that they raised and how we addressed them. So the first was a question about how we modeled the noise. Long story short, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can assume the noise emulates from a single point, or you can assume that it emulates from an area, and you can kind of show that noise going different directions. And so they asked us how we did that. And what we said is that the best containers were modeled as a vertical area source, and that the inverters and transformers were modeled as point sources. This is very common for this equipment, just based off of how they make noise and what direction it goes. They asked whether or not we took reflection of noise into account, and the answer is yes, that we did. So all the best containers were modeled as structures with metal walls, like they really are, and all the noise that can bounce off of that were taken into account as well. Stantec also asked about our receiver height, in other words, the height of say, like a theoretical microphone that would be listening to these noise. And we modeled it at 5 feet above grade. And they did take a little bit of issue with that and made a really good suggestion, which brings us to the next slide. They said, hey, why don't you model a 2-story structure, just because there are some around there. So we did run the model again, basically doubling the receiver height to emulate a two-story structure. And what we found is that we increased the noise by about 1 decibel, or 51.7 decibels, but in any case, 3.3 decibels below what the ordinance required. And that was measured at the Tower Road location where our former landowner lives. Another issue that Stantec brought up is tonal prominence. And so when you report the volume of a noise, that could mean that certain tones, perhaps annoying tones, could be louder, while other tones could be quieter, but the average is still below the ordinance. And so what they asked us to do is take a look at whether or not there were any prominent tones, such that even though it's only 51.7 decibels, is there going to be like, you know, a little whistle or a shriek or something in there that would be annoying that is more prominent that doesn't come out in the study. And we did do an octave band analysis to model 100% load, so the battery's operating at full blast, and all of the tones that come off of it based off of lab measurements of the noise that come off of these systems in the laboratory for the specific equipment we're using. The results are populated in that table. I do not expect any of that to make sense, but we did provide this to Stantec. And in any case, what the octave band analysis shows is that none of the individual octave band noise levels exceed two adjacent ones by more than 3 decibels. And what that means is that there's no prominent tones identified, and you know, nothing that's hidden within that 51.7 decibels that the human ear is going to perceive at a higher tonal prominence than any other noise. All right, so with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Wayne with ERM to speak about groundwater, stormwater, and geotechnical.
Thanks, Joe. On a high, just kind of a high perspective, just going over a combination of stormwater and groundwater. There's a little bit of both that we kind of, their interaction is there. But just a little bit of background about the site itself. Just on USDA, just taking a look at the soil types that are there. There's both C and D soils, basically kind of a lean clay. Fairly, infiltration rates are fairly low to begin with. So there will be some additional geotechnical work that will be done that will follow up with foundations and such for the structures that are there. But right now we kind of know that there's a slow vertical transference of water going into the ground in this area. There has been some geotechnical work that has been done. Specifically, when these were done, we were also looking at the groundwater levels as well. Within the 10-acre site, there's actually a wide variety of water elevations as far as the groundwater. So we've got basically between 893 and 907, basically about 10 feet or so of difference in elevation of groundwater. And this is, indicative of kind of perched water tables and other things when you get in these type of soils. So across the area there's one of the things that is noticed on the aerial that you saw earlier, there's a basin that's on the east side of the site. And so basically what that is, it's a combination of retention, holding water, and also detention. Will release water during larger storm events. But we've been taking a look at what the elevations of the groundwater in that area as well. And so the bottom that we're looking at right now is still at least about either 9 to 10 feet difference from where the groundwater is at this time. And that's even on a conservative level. So this is something that we'll take a closer look at as we develop plans even further, and also confirming groundwater depths. But at this time, well within the range of what the county's requirement for stormwater requirements are. Which gets a little bit more into the design here, and just on a high level, focusing again on the basin, the location of the basin. What we have done is done what they call a double ring infiltrometer test, just to confirm what we already know from the soils data originally, just confirming what is actually the infiltration rate at those locations at that depth. So, and that ranges anywhere between 2.5 or 2.25 to as low as 0.13 inches per hour. This is really on the low end of the spectrum for infiltrating water. So again, going back to the county's guidelines, is that you basically, we're using for right now for the sizing purposes and also for infiltration, we're using on the very low end here about 2.25 inches per hour, and that's actually with a factor of safety on it of ×2. So taking a real conservative approach to this. And that's one reason that helps us size the basin, is why it's the size that it is right now. Taking a closer look at the county requirements here. And for those that maybe have not seen what the rules and guidelines are, there is a component there about a first flush, basically. The first inch of water that comes off the site needs to be captured and then infiltrated into the ground. And that's about 22,000 cubic feet of water, just from a water quality standpoint. And then from there, you have the 100-year storm event. And the 100-year storm event, we're looking at both rate and volume in this case, because there will be an increase in volume. Obviously, it's changing from an agricultural field to a gravel surface. So that's taken into account when we do this. So there's a 100-year storm event that's analyzed for this, but then per the county rules again, the maximum discharge rate they have is like 0.1 CFS per acre. So 1.5 CFS is allowed off the site during a 100-year storm event. So for those that are, looking at a culvert, the velocity coming out of a culvert, under 2 CFS, it's about, you don't even need riprap at that point. So it's a real low flow in a 100-year storm event. So that discharges just adjacent right into the ditch there that's alongside the road, also referred to as a stream as you go further north, and so that's the existing drainage there. But that's kind of high level, just groundwater and water resources on the site.
Okay, so another topic that we covered extensively in prior meetings was basically what can leak out of a BESS, what is in the firewater, and Stantec, the city engineer, did have some extensive comments on that as well. And we're going to address some of those comments a little bit later, but I think for the benefit of a recap and for the general public, we do want to talk a little bit, and these are some slides that you guys have seen before, just to recap about what can leak and the nature of firewater for BESS. So very quickly, lithium iron phosphate batteries, like what we're proposing, they are not flooded like car batteries. So there's not a tank in there that has liquid in it. Rather, you have micron level, very, very thin layers of liquid that are wetted in between layers of plastic and anode and cathode. And so if you were to poke a hole in the side of this thing, nothing is going to come out. And what little liquid is exposed there has a really high vapor pressure. And so you can think of that as having like a really low boiling point, so low that at any normal temperature that you basically see on planet Earth, it instantaneously vaporizes. And so that's why these batteries don't leak. One, because it's not in a tank, and two, if a little bit of it gets exposed, it just immediately turns into a vapor. These systems also contain a liquid cooling system, and so that's effectively a water and glycol mixture. The reason the glycol is in there is the same reason why you might have antifreeze in your car, which also uses a water glycol mixture, and that's to make sure that it doesn't freeze when it gets super cool. And that is circulated between the batteries to keep them cool in these teeny tiny little capillary tubes about the size of a straw. And so the entire system has about 52 gallons of this liquid in it, but none of it is stored in an open tank. And if a leak were to cool, a combination of capillary action, in other words, kind of a pressure that keeps the liquid inside of those little capillary tubes that look like straws, as well as the way that those straws are distributed throughout, means that you'd have a leak of about a gallon or so. And just in case, the systems do have a secondary containment in the bottom of them to catch that. And we talked about this pretty extensively before. There's several thousand of these operating in the US and worldwide. And I've worked on, I think, over 400 or 500 of them at this point. I also read all the incidents that occur at any of these projects worldwide if they do happen. And leaks are just not one of the issues you might have. There are other things that obviously do go wrong from time to time, and we can address those, but leaks are just not one of them. Nonetheless, we do want to make it super transparent what is in the batteries, how that system is designed, and in any case demonstrate that there's secondary containment as a backup. So in addition to the liquids that are inherent to the system, people often are interested in firewater. And I think to back up a little bit, in the past, firewater was applied to these batteries if they caught fire, and the batteries themselves had a very different chemistry. Those two things are very different now. We do not apply water in the vast majority of circumstances, especially at projects in rural areas, which is where the vast majority of these are. The one exception might be is if you had a battery next to a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. At that point, you might still put water on it. It's not going to put the fire out, but what it can do is it can eliminate the magnitude of the fire because the loss of the skyscraper next door is a bigger deal. So we don't apply water anymore on projects like this, and the chemistry is used to contain heavy metals. The chemistry that was prominent was called nickel, manganese, and cobalt, and now we use lithium iron phosphate. The entire industry does, and they do not contain heavy metals, rare earths, or anything like that. So with that being said, when best fire water has been applied to a best fire in the past, what is in that fire is really well understood because that water is being collected and sent to a laboratory for tests. And what we find is that it doesn't contain any constituents that are above EPA drinking water standards, even though it might still contain constituents. What I mean by that is, when you measure the water, you might measure a little bit of manganese, a little bit of nickel, and a little bit of cobalt. And they weren't there before, but they're still below the EPA drinking water threshold. And so these are things that show up in drinking water in different parts of the world from time to time, and the EPA has established standards for that. The biggest incident where I think a study came out of this and is considered the de facto standard as far as a study on firewater was a best fire that occurred in Escondido, California. This did have that nickel, manganese, cobalt chemistry. And there's a key quote from that report that I think kind of demonstrates the points that I was trying to make. And so samples of runoff water were assessed for the presence of 17 toxic metals. The analysis detected some level of 6 of those 17 metals, but the report noted that concentrations were below EPA drinking water standards and that the runoff did not poses minimal risk to human health and the environment. There are very similar studies that have been done by the EPA or by other third-party consultants commissioned by fire departments after many other best fires. They all have a unanimous finding with them. And in any case, we don't apply water anymore and our chemistry is different, which are the 2 key points I want to make. So now to get specifically into the Stantec comments on water contamination, I framed these as quotes from the report, and I would say that before we get into this, we are looking forward to engaging with Stantec on this further, because I think there might have been some misunderstandings about what chemistry we were using or what our emergency response plan would look like or what industry best practices related to that are. So we recognize that there probably is a little bit more back and forth with Stantec on this. So the first quote was that these fires are difficult to extinguish using traditional firefighter methods. We agree. That is why fire suppression is not recommended at best fires at rural projects anymore. This isn't our recommendation. This is what the National Fire Protection Association says to do, as well as several other industry trade associations associated with firefighting and battery industry. Instead of that, a defensive posture that relies on equipment containment, separation between the equipment, and setbacks from the equipment and the lot line are dictated in codes like International Fire Code Chapter 12, the National Fire Protection Association Code 855, which applies to energy storage systems, as well as Underwriter Laboratories 9540, which also applies to energy storage systems. And so we're not trying to put the battery fires out anymore. We know that that is not best practice, and that is universally recognized that that is not best practice anymore, and that's why I keep emphasizing that there will not be fire water. What we do is we let it burn out, and we make sure that small amounts of energy are in any one place at one time, and that there's a large aisle between groups of batteries and large setbacks between our batteries and adjacent lot lines. Another quote was that suppression water is used to cool adjacent batteries to reduce the risk of additional batteries catching on fire. So a couple nuances here. Suppression is never the goal. So suppression of any type, suppression water of any type is not recommended for best at rural projects. However, in limited cases, cooling water can be applied in what's called a fog pattern. So as the name implies, it would be like a low pressure spray of fog. You can control the nozzle on a fire nozzle to be a straight stream, which is like a blast all the way to a fog. It's recommended to be applied in a fog pattern. And this is at the discretion of the fire department's incident commander. And so, for example, if there were prevailing winds going on, whereby the winds are blowing the flames from one best unit to another, and you see impingement of the flames from the unit that's on fire on an adjacent one that's not on fire, the incident commander may elect to apply low pressure cooling water to that adjacent container just to cool it down a little bit. That water is not contaminated because it's the equivalent of putting water on a shipping container, because that's effectively what these units are. They're shipping containers with batteries inside, and you're applying the water to the adjacent unit. That's also not the de facto first thing you do and it's actually not as common as I think the statement from the city engineer might state. So you don't just show up and automatically spray water places. In fact, that's pretty rare. You would have to have a certain set of circumstances that cause the flame to be blowing across an aisle, where out of an abundance of caution, you apply that cooling water. With that, there is roughly 100 utility scale battery fires that have been reported worldwide. And those are all operating projects. And when they were equipped with what's called an NFPA 855 separation aisle, or 10 feet in between one battery to the next, not once did it ever propagate across that aisle in any of the reported incidents. And that's one of the reasons why we have that aisle, because we know that that's going to be enough to keep the fire from spreading. For the benefit of the general public, because I know the commissioners have already heard this, and any members of the general public that were here at our prior meetings would know this, that 10 foot is not arbitrary. It was determined by the National Fire Protection Association after testing dozens of these batteries and looking at historical instances where they have caught fire. And also, for the equipment that we deploy on the site, before we can deploy it legally, we are required to do a large-scale fire test under the code to ensure that its characteristics are appropriately reflected in the design. And if that 10-foot aisle is determined not to be sufficient, we might have to make it bigger. You can also make it smaller in some cases, but that's not something that Key Capture ever does by default. Another quote that came from the city engineer was that when suppression water encounters the lithium-ion battery fire, it may become contaminated with heavy metals such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, etc. So a couple things here. Lithium is not a heavy metal. Cobalt and nickel are. Lithium is actually used in a lot of medications, and it's actually considered a micronutrient in the body, and so at low concentrations. Unlike heavy metals, it's not necessarily something that's bad for you. That's more of a technicality, but I think using precise language is important in these things, right? To not just lump lithium together with heavy metals, because there's very different characteristics of what heavy metals and other metals like lithium do to the human body. Heavy metals were indeed present in prior generation BESS projects. Generally speaking, a project that came on in 2022 or earlier would have this nickel, manganese, cobalt chemistry. And as I mentioned, we use lithium iron phosphate, as does the vast majority of the rest of the industry, and that doesn't contain heavy metals. And the reason why those heavy metals were found in the fire water was, one, water was applied, and you're not supposed to do that anymore, and two, because there was heavy metals in the chemistry. And if we don't have heavy metals in our chemistry, it is not going to end up in the water because it just simply doesn't exist at the project. And as we noted before, suppression water is not recommended at BESS fires at rural projects really of any chemistry. In these prior generation nickel, manganese, cobalt projects, when the water was applied, it was found to be below EPA drinking water standards. We talked about that a little bit before, right? But this is how I think sometimes the news media can be sensational about this, right? It can be simultaneously true that nickel was found at 5 times the background level in the water, but is still 1/1000th of the level of an EPA drinking water standard, right? And so I think how you frame some of those results is really important. And like we mentioned before, the fire water runoff from incidents that have occurred has been collected on all the major incidents, analyzed by independent third parties on behalf of the fire department, as well as the current Environmental Protection Agency, and that has been published. If you go to the Trump EPA's website, they actually have a special report on energy storage where they talk about some of these issues, and their conclusions are very similar to ours. Okay, so this is probably the biggest one I want to talk about. So I know that this is a long one, so bear with me. So in the Stantec report, it says, and I quote, "If not properly managed, contaminated suppression water could potentially migrate off-site and increase the risk of contaminating surface and groundwater. To alleviate these concerns, we recommend, at a minimum, including these mitigated measures on the site plan. A, to provide secondary containment structures such as berms, dikes, and dedicated retention basins to catch all potential fire water runoff and keep it from migrating off-site. B, use geomembrane liners to prevent and stop pollutant migration into the soil, into the groundwater. And C, compliance with the latest industry standards such as NFPA 855, Fuel 540, and then they state that we said that we're going to do that. So C is fine. We do that on all of our projects nationwide. We don't have a choice but to comply with those. They're mandated in basically every jurisdiction that we work, universally nationwide. But I do want to talk a little bit more about A and B, which is the secondary containment structures and the geomembrane liner. These statements and recommendations, I think, are predicated on a few assumptions. The first is that there will be fire water. As we mentioned before, There will not be fire water in the vast majority of cases. That is not the go-to standard, and it's not recommended by any fire protection organization. The second is that the water will be contaminated. As we mentioned before, in the past, it has contained heavy metals when the battery contained heavy metals, even though it still met EPA drinking water standards. We use a different chemistry. So we aren't going to have those heavy metals, and in any case, even if we did, they would not be contaminants because they are still below the EPA drinking water standards. And then I think lastly there is that our stormwater and geotechnical design are well within prudent industry practices, both from a civil engineering perspective and a fire protection engineering perspective, and are sufficient to mitigate stormwater and fire water runoff that may come up. And so, like I mentioned before, we're very interested in working more with Stantec on this, but I think the analysis assumes a chemistry that we are not using, and it assumes firefighting methods that are not consistent with what is currently recommended for projects of this type. All right, so with that along done, and to stay with the theme of fire protection engineering, I'm going to turn it over to Evan right now, who's going to talk a little bit about the plume study that Fire and Risk Alliance performed, as well as some of the comments related to Stantec had.
Good evening. In the pursuit of brevity, I'll kind of skip right to the point. FRA is Fire and Risk Alliance. We are an engineering firm that does plume modeling, blast modeling, destructive testing, fire suppression systems, and analysis of these systems. Myself, I am not an engineer. I'm the captain of Engine 239 in New York City. I work in Brooklyn, New York. I've worked with FRA for the past 2 years. I went to CHDS, which is the Center for Homeland Defense and Security, at Naval Postgraduate School, and I wrote my master's thesis on fire department response to lithium-ion batteries. So I work with engineers now, and we take the what from all the engineers can put out a lot of numbers, and we try to take the what and make a so what. So we do fire department response training, where you look at the hazards that are there and the realistic hazards where they may be there, it may be an issue, and we look at how does the fire department respond. You know, what is really there. All right. Maybe don't sleep here. So FRA did do the plume analysis, and they did the plume modeling. From the plume modeling, we received the Stantec memo, and FRA has answered with a 3-page memo to answer all the questions. It's a longer conversation, I think, each one. If you want to look at, or we could discuss any of the plume questions, if they're relevant here, but I think the memo really speaks to it in detail. KCE, I don't want to speak for them, but they said that they have made some changes to the plan, the 330-foot exclusion zone into the ERP, that's the emergency response plan. The exclusion zone that FRA recommends is 100 feet, but 330 feet is the EPA recommended one. That comes from the standoff distance from hydrogen. There's not a lot of information on battery failures because there are many that have happened, and you always have to take worst case scenario. So when you look at if this failed, you look at the absolute worst case scenario, and that was the plume analysis. When they looked at that plume, they modeled if the entire container had a catastrophic failure, something that we have not seen, and it went in a catastrophic way that was something like 60 minutes, where we haven't seen any cabinets fail that quick or spread that much. There is passive fire suppression systems built into these cabinets that are outside of, ANSIL or clean agents. There's separation. There's redundant safeties within them to shut them down so you don't get failures. A common failure for one of these cabinets would be a battery failure. It goes offline, a technician comes out, takes the battery out, and they replace the whole module. So what we've seen is not a lot of what we've heard, so taking reality into consideration is part of this. So when I look at this, the plume study, if I look at this site, we do have, as I stated before, there are sites out there that are 10 feet from the lot line. We're 10 feet away, and then we have a hospital with an air intake. For that occasion, that is a problem. When I see the outside setups, like this remote battery storage setup, this is the ideal response if you had to respond to something. It's far away from everything, and that plume is going to go up in the air and dissipate very quickly. The things we see coming off of this plume are very similar to a house fire. There's a paper coming out. It was supposed to be published 2 months ago, but it's being held up. But FRA had a part in writing it, and they looked at the plume studies, the plume analysis of smoke from a house fire, and then the smoke from this, and there's not much difference. Most of the negative stuff you're getting is from the plastics burning. That is the casing of the batteries. Same as the casing in our TVs and our chairs that we're sitting on. There are foams in everything, and these are giving off. So any fire or smoke you see isn't good to inhale, but it's just a matter of level setting this. We look at a structure fire compared to this. Now this, the redundant safeties here, and the likelihood that this would go on fire, it's just remote. The concern is valid, it is real, and all the concerns that we have are real, but the likelihood and the probability just are not. So instead of me telling you what you want to hear, I'd like to make myself available after the presentation and answer some questions candidly. FRA, we are consultants, so we are a third party. We are working for and with KCE, but I can answer on behalf of my experience, the studies we've seen, and the engineers at FRA. Thank you.
Okay, so we wanted to address property values again. Another topic we discussed pretty extensively, but if you recall when we discussed in the past, we had generic studies that have been done on the impact of energy storage projects on property values. We committed to engaging a third-party appraiser to do a specific analysis of this area. And so we engaged a nationwide firm called Cohn Resnick. They did a project-specific property value impact study, and they did it to what's called the USPAT standards. So that's the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, and that is the organization that dictates the means and methods by which these appraisals are done, really for any type of project, housing development, anything you could build that could have an impact on property values. And what they did is they interviewed multiple real estate brokers with houses and businesses that are nearby energy storage, and looked at other real estate transactions and what they looked like before and after energy storage was there. And that report, has that been provided yet, Brian, or it's to be provided?
To be provided.
Yeah, to be provided, so happy to provide it so you guys can look through all the details there. I think the key quote there is that the data indicates there's no trend of negative impact on adjacent property values based on their location near battery energy storage systems. And as I mentioned in the past when we spoke about that, we do project-specific reports on basically all of our projects, and that is the key finding from just about all of them. Nonetheless, they do redo the analysis every single time. I also kind of want to recap some of the other nationwide studies that have been done on this. We spoke about this a little bit in prior meetings. One was the University of Pennsylvania BEST study, where their key finding was, and I quote, across 178 utility scale BEST projects that they looked at, houses near an operational utility scale BEST project do not experience significant price changes compared to houses farther from the same project. In prior meeting, we also shared a study that was done by Right of Way magazine, which is apparently a thing that exists. And what they did is they looked at transmission lines. And their findings were, and I quote, the results indicate both practically and statistically significant effects from transmission lines. Effects range from negative 1.1% of property values at 300 meters to negative 5.1% at 50 meters. And so large high voltage transmission lines, they're taller, they buzz, they're uglier, they do impact property values. As we've mentioned in the past, one of the reasons we cite at substations, among many reasons, is the fact that we will not have an impact because the substation is already there. So whatever impacts have been felt to property values have been here for decades, ever since the substation was built. And therefore we are not a major impact there because we are not as tall, we are not as bright, we are not as noisy, and as you can tell from the Coventry substation that's out there, we're going to have a lot more vegetative screening as well, so you can't see it either. Happy to talk a little bit about this more if people have questions on it, but we just wanted to share that as requested, we did do a project-specific study in addition to sharing some of the more generic studies. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Joel. Make this one brief, we're almost done. This almost final slide, wanted to mention that we have been working with the township on a host community agreement that recognizes that the township has a unique circumstance where no local property tax is levied. And so in order to try and make the township whole, we have come to an agreement to provide 20 recurring annual payments of $100,000. And so combined with the Michigan State Grant, that brings the project benefit here locally to $2.7 million. So it's not insignificant, I think, for the 10 acres that the project will occupy. I think that when we consider the impacts and concerns, or when we consider the concerns of the public and the commission and various subject matter experts from the township, we have addressed all of those concerns and researched and looked into it. And Key Capture is very motivated to try and permit this project locally, and so we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And before I close it out, I will turn it over to Mike.
As Brian indicated, this will be the last slide, so, and it's probably the smallest, and no one can read it, so I'll be very quick. Again, Mike Vogt with Dickinson Wright, land use and zoning attorney. I've worked a lot with the State Bar, with their, with the zoning and land use subcommittee, which I chair, and have the pleasure of working with Key Capture on this project, and have helped them with developing other projects in Michigan communities as well. I'll be very brief, and I take this opportunity to thank the Planning Commission and Township consultants for all of the work that's gone into reviewing this application over several months, and use this opportunity also just to emphasize two quick points. One is Key Capture, the applicant's desire to permit this project locally. As Township consultants and council and Planning Commission, and many of you probably know, there is a alternative route through the state, through the Michigan Public Service Commission for citing these types of projects. That route was available to Key Capture 7 months before they applied locally. That route has remained available for the 11 months that the application has remained pending. And with a recent Court of Appeals decision addressing that MPSC process, that process remains available now. But so it's not just me saying that they're desiring to permit this project locally. They are here purely by choice, and that's not by happenstance. That's because these projects, all projects, are better cited when they're done in collaboration with the local community that you're partnering with. And here, it's in everyone's best interest, from the township's interest, obviously. I'll start with Key Capture. Actually, with Key Capture, it's better. It's a more efficient path to becoming a community partner, and it enables them to collaborate and tailor their project to the community's specific concerns and requests that they hear at these throughout the review process and the public hearing. From the township's perspective, local permitting comes with several obvious benefits, both very tangible and material, in that it allows the township to maintain the control of the approval process, in the sense that they can work with the developer, impose reasonable conditions on development. In a project like this that results in things like elevated decommissioning obligations and elevated screening requirements, and just addressing all the concerns that we hear through the township and the consultants. But in addition to approval, it allows the township to retain its enforcement mechanisms. This is a project that has a 20 to 30 year lifespan anticipated, and if there is any issue, any enforcement issue under the code, or any issue arises with a neighbor, I know that communities value their ability to be able to enforce their rights under their own ordinance. And while there hasn't been any certificates actually issued yet at the MPSC, the prevailing thought is that enforcement of an MPSC certificate will be done by some level of state agency. I don't know exactly what agency or how that's going to be administered just yet, but that's just another benefit, obviously, of working and citing things locally as it's always been done. And the last are the economic benefits that Brian mentioned. We have a opportunity through the Michigan's Eagle for grant funds up to $500,000 here. It's $5,000 per megawatt, which only is eligible for communities that site project locally. They're not available if you go through the MPSC. And then it's really worth noting this host community agreement that's been offered by Key Capture, the applicant, which matches the $200,000 that the community would get if we went through the state process, but also has this $100,000 per year payment for 20 years totaling, $2 million that does not exist under the state approval process. So I just mentioned all of these things because they are both tangible signs of Key Capture's desire to be a great community partner and bring a great, well-cited project that makes good sense for this community to Salem, and also about the tangible benefits that the community will receive by citing this project locally. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are going to, we are going to open the public hearing just to let the public know. This is not the first time Key Capture has been to us. They came in February and did an entire presentation for about 2 hours and answered questions, or maybe it was, maybe longer than 2 hours. Okay, maybe it was 5 hours. So we're fairly well versed in a lot of these things. I think we still have some additional questions as well, but we really think it's important that we went through that presentation so that you understand, and you'll hear our questions too, and you'll hear where we're coming from. A lot of these questions have already been answered for most of us, but we thought it's important that you hear what's going on in our community. And just as a reminder, we are your community as well. Matter of fact, Mr. Huntsman talks about backyard, it's his. So it's not, I haven't seen many of you before, so I just want you to know that we are here to look out for the community, and that's why we're working with, we're fortunate that we get to work with, we have planners, we have attorneys, we have engineers, we have experts, we have our local hazmat guy, our fire chief here. So everybody is looking and asking, we're relying on them to ask the questions that we don't know. We have neighborhood knowledge, these guys are the experts, so I'm sure we'll get through this. So do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I make a motion to open the public hearing for KCE until 8:37 p.m.
Okay.
Also.
Mike, and when it comes, Paul, just clarify, when it comes to the questions, Ann gave me a list. Is this the order of the public hearing, or is just?
They can speak at any order they want to.
Okay. So do I go off the list, or do we do it like an open, like we normally do?
Just open it.
Just open.
That's just for record keeping.
Okay.
And if you haven't signed the sign-in and you do speak, please sign it so we know who you are.
Okay. Who has questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Betty Fishbeck, and our property is across the road south of the substation. And our concern is, where is the runoff going to go if it's not contained, if there is some sort of a disaster? Because anything that flows south will go down the ditch to a culvert under Tower Road onto our property.
Any other questions? Is that the only one?
I think Mohammed Harwali, Spring Meadow Lane. I heard a lot of the benefits from the state, the township. But what is it for us in the neighborhood?
So just so to clarify, the open to the public is not a back and forth, but I am keeping track of your questions. So, and I'm sure we'll get them answered. Yes, ma'am.
Any research on the...
And your name, please?
Betty Stremick. Any research on the impact of wildlife, on tone level, and on just general impact?
Yes, ma'am.
Kelly Gallagher from Spring Meadow Lane. I'm curious if we'll be able to have access to the memos that were put together by the city engineer to see what their comments were on the plume study and the other comments that they put together.
Yes, sir.
Just want to say, good evening. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the planning commission just allowing me to speak and just taking the time to review the materials over the past time. My name is Noah Butita. I'm with the Michigan Land and Liberty Coalition. We're a local conservative-based nonprofit that advocate for renewable energy projects at the local level. Our role is to work with landowners and community members to address concerns, as well as advocate for renewable energy projects just at the local level. These projects are more about than just a battery storage project. It's rooted in economic opportunity and overall grid stability as we move into an age of increased demand for technology and energy usage. Salem Township here has one of the major substations in the state of Michigan, and this project will help supplement and strengthen our grid by being connected to it. This location allows the project just to have the most efficient support for the grid needs it boasts. The battery storage systems itself do provide the most consistent and quick dispatchable energy that can help reduce the need of peaker plants, which drive up all of our costs, and that end result can just have less strain on our grid and more reliability. Obviously, just considering that by working locally, the township is eligible for up to $500,000, and that can be used at the township's own discretion. And just with that, with the benefits in mind, just considering the role that these projects will play in the overall reliability of our grid. So I just respectfully urge the planning commission to support the project.
Do we have anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 questions. Katie Pickup from Joy Road. I'd like to know if they considered any brownfield sites in their alternative analysis, anything they did. The presentation that was given by, I believe it was FRA, it sounded like, that study was paid for and engaged by Key Capture, so I'm just a bit concerned about if there's a conflict of interest there. And then third, I would like a bit more of an explanation about how this improves reliability, because generally during one of our big storm events where we lose power, it's due to a downed line. It's not that there's not enough power on the grid. So my question is, how does this facility improve reliability when the issue is not so much the power that's available to us, it's that the lines are down?
Anyone else? Going once? Twice? We have a motion to close.
I made the motion to close the public hearing at 8:44 p.m. on the KCE hearing.
I'll second.
Okay. Now, I'm sure the planning commission has some questions. I know I've got some highlights and some stickers. Anyone want to go first? Bart?
Oh, geez.
Permission to ask questions that I already know the answer to?
we could do that.
Are you
Yep.
okay if we try to address the questions that came from the public hearing commission?
Yes.
That's,
Let's have our experts answer those questions in regards, or we'll actually have the applicant, someone address from Capture the runoff issue from Ms. Fishbeck, where the runoff goes. And
I suppose I should move the mic. It's helpful to have obviously an aerial image on there to take a look at where it goes, but right adjacent to the site, just on the north corner of the site, there's an existing ditch, also referred to as a stream. The water itself right now is, the site itself kind of drains in that direction already, so basically what we're doing is we're following the pre-existing runoff direction of the water. So the outfall to the basin is going to discharge directly into that stream. And my understanding right now is it drains to the north is the direction, but as to the larger, it's also tied by a culvert going across the roadway at that location too. So, I mean, as we all probably know in this area, it doesn't take much to flood one area and kind of go into another area too. So it depends on what storm event you kind of hit and where the flows go. So there's some overland flow that happens too. So it's a little bit easier to break that down. That type of information is going to come out a little bit further too when we work with the county and dealing with the drainage patterns then too. So there's going to be another opportunity to break that down a little bit more for impacts too. Okay.
Because if it does flow south, it goes into our property.
Yeah. So in this case,
That's a concern because we have preserved farmland, and we do know years ago there was a PCB spill, a fire at Covington, and it went out a little creek just like you have on Ziegler's property, ended up down on Joy Road. You had to excavate, or they had to excavate clear onto the south to where they're building houses now. So it was a mess. And we don't want to see anything like that.
yeah, understand.
And you tend to be higher than our property.
Yeah,
Elevation-wise, you're higher.
Yeah, and the elevation, yeah, probably is higher at that location.
And water goes down and finds its own way.
So the premise behind the design is that, I mentioned before about rate, volume, and water quality, but focusing on rate and volume is to keep those below pre-existing conditions. That's just a general premise, but you can actually even throttle down a little bit further with that for this particular project with development of this nature when you consider impervious surfaces. So it's throttled down a little bit further. But you also have the benefit too of the basin too, that control structure. So that provides the water quality, volume, and rate that I mentioned before. So there's a lot more going on than what was there historically, so there's more control there.
So your excess flow is going to go to the basin or
Yes.
little lake in front.
Yep.
When that overflows, it's going to go north to the creek that's there.
It'll follow the existing pathway,
Okay.
but at a rate that's actually lower than pre-existing conditions.
Okay.
And
Just tell it
Magic.
all to go north.
Magic, did you want to just, they have their side and fair balance, right? So Magic,
So,
did you
yeah,
want to
we-
make a comment, or is there anything?
Sure, yeah, thank you. No,
Agree, disagree?
I agree with what he said, Wayne, and I think we don't have a lot of design information at this level, so that's part of what we'll be looking at, and also they'll be working with the County Water Resources Commission on getting approvals for the storm management as well, so anyway, I agree with that assessment.
Okay.
So there's still going to be testing and whatever going on. It's not a definitive situation at this point.
The design is at about 30%, so there's more work that will be done.
Okay.
And it'll also be in conjunction, like you mentioned, with the county. And this is good feedback, good information to have those the concerns right now, because we'll take that into the design considerations and the development as we work with partners on this.
Thank you.
Yep. They're recording everything.
Oh, my God.
And I got a recorder, so. It's okay, no, those are good things to know. That's why we're glad you're here, so they can take that into consideration, like you said, for the design of it too, for protection. Benefits to the people. Paul? Or is that more of an Ed question?
No.
Well, there's the community benefit agreement that was discussed that's in the works with the township. Specific benefits to folks on Spring Meadow, I think maybe that's something that you all might want to discuss as you go through your deliberation here. I don't know that there's any specific localized benefits that are being proposed at this point.
No. You know, they talk about the taxes, but then most of that goes to Plymouth. You know, we really don't have much to do with that, but then we do have a host agreement, and they have made, KCE, they are providing, and it's everything from adding an extra driveway requested by the fire chief. You heard about the screening, you know, 6 to 8 feet, so you're not looking at, you know, saplings. And they talked about the money goes to the township. It doesn't come to anybody here, but we've got fire training and all those kinds of things. Always helps the community, you know. We have, so nothing goes to the residents individually that I'm aware of, but it does go to the community. And then, of course, you know, your input when you attend the board meetings, how that money is spent.
You could help the situation if you pave our road for us.
We're not talking about paving roads at this meeting.
That's a benefit to us.
That
You
would
guys
make it a
are
lot
using our road.
That is a can of worms we're gonna skip right over. Okay, moving on to Ms. Betty.
The $2 million benefit that was mentioned by the attorney, what township does that go to?
Salem.
Impact to the wildlife, and then we're at this, and tones, and general impact, probably to the community, to the neighbors,
So
probably.
whether he finds the slide or not, because we did talk about this a little bit, very common question, and sometimes it's very specifically relative to like local bovine populations or deer, west, sometimes elk, things like that. In any case, when it comes to like the impacts of a vest, it usually is focused on the noise that it makes, or if it does catch fire, what is in the smoke. As we spoke about earlier, the smoke is very similar to that of a structure fire because what's really burning is plastics, and there's a lot of plastics in the vest, and there's a lot of plastics in the standard house. And so that's kind of what creates the nastiest particulate matter that comes off. And without a doubt, the smoke from a house fire and the smoke from a vest is toxic. All smoke is bad. We're not trying to say that it's not. And there are studies that have been done at various different species about smoke inhalation. And not unsurprisingly, what happens to an animal's lungs is very similar to our lungs, where there can be acute smoke inhalation, but there doesn't tend to be lasting effects. The smoke is hot, it rises, it dissipates over time. A lot of these studies are from wildfire smoke, which when it comes to impacts on the lung actually has a higher particulate matter. And so that's kind of used as like the proxy for this. So, you know, all smoke is bad no matter what it comes from. And if an animal, human or otherwise, has lungs and it is exposed to that at high concentrations, it can lead to smoke inhalation. We did present some studies on that before. Like I said, they're not specific to best because nobody lights a battery on fire and then puts a deer next to it and finds out what happens. But, you know, there are things that have come out of predominantly wildfires that have studied that. So then that brings us to sound. And so we didn't talk about it extensively tonight, but we did talk about in previous presentations that pitch and tone are really important. And a lot of people focus on volume, but how high or low the frequency is and the quality of the noise or tone is also really important when it comes to how annoying it is perceived to be and how it can impact humans and animals alike. And so that was why we did that octave band study that kind of showed, looked at all the different bands of frequencies that you can see to figure out whether or not there's anything there that is prominent. And what we found is that it is not prominent. That being said, I mentioned earlier on a different topic that we site next to substations, one, because that's where the electrical need is at typically, but also those substations are putting on off electromagnetic frequencies and pitches of all types that far exceed what a BESS does. And so even though there is no specific data that shows that a BESS impacts local wildlife, what we do know is that any impacts that may have happened have already occurred from the large substation that is already existing from where we have been. The closest animal impact that I could potentially see, it's not been a study that has been specifically done for energy storage systems, but they have looked at like monstrous multi-thousand acre solar sites. Solar uses inverter technology that takes the DC energy and turns it into AC, alternating current energy. We also use that. We are not a solar facility, we're not a renewable energy facility, but we do use inverters. And what they have found is that those really large solar sites, in the very middle of it, you might have slightly reduced fat concentrations in areas that are heavy with fats, versus if the solar site was not there. We use 1/250th of the land per inverter megawatt of what solar does. It's just like much smaller land use, and so will our inverters be heard by the bats? Yes. Will it cause a measurable reduction in bat activity? Highly unlikely, because even what they've measured for much larger solar farms, it is very, very minute. So it's a really good question, and it's one we get a lot, and I appreciate you asking it.
So, was it Betty?
Yes.
I think maybe you also were curious, just like generally, if we had done any site investigation of the site to see what kind of species are there and if we would have any impacts. And
I certainly have, but that's because I live next door.
okay, so we had a biologist go to the site and evaluate the habitat and what's out there. We consulted with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and both have concurred that we won't have any adverse effect on any sensitive or listed species. So we'll have to implement some avoidance measures, just in terms of timing of when we do construction, but we have our instructions from the federal and state agencies, and we'll comply with those directions.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay. Access to all the memos, absolutely, they're online right now. So you can, anything that we have, you guys have access to.
I have a quick question and follow up to the sound. Is that fine to ask now? Or shall I wait?
Let's wait a minute, because I think we'll probably get to that. Let's see, Noah, Katie. Jill, this is probably, Brian. Consider brownfield sites, the RFA conflict of interest, and how to prove or improve reliability. Prove reliability.
This will be a little bit of a two-pronged answer. So we did look at other sites here in Salem Township, specifically around the landfill. Unfortunately, Coventry Substation is really the best location for this facility because it is a large substation and has all those transmission lines coming in and out of it. I think it's 7. The other transmission lines that are kind of near the landfill did not have the same access to the transmission grid that we do here with this site. So we extensively looked at the industrial zones. I know the township has a preference for this project to be there. Unfortunately, it just doesn't meet the commercial, and those sites just are not viable from a logistical perspective for feedback.
Yeah, and I can add to that a little bit. So one of the primary siting criteria for us is a location that has an electrical need, meaning there's a problem there. And so independent power producers like us have access to grid data nationwide, similar to utilities do. It's protected by national security limitations, and so it's not something, unfortunately, we are able to openly share. But what we basically look at is the direction and the flow, the amount of power over every transmission line, every distribution line, and we look for substations that have a problem, meaning that that Coventry substation has been there for a while, and electrical flows have changed where they go, or they've gotten bigger over time, and that means that something is required to fix that problem. We've spoken about this a little bit with the commission in the past, but when you need to solve an electrical problem, generally means a bigger substation, a solar farm, a wind farm, or like a fossil fuel resource, depending on the nature of generation that is required to fix that problem, or a battery. And in the grand context of what is annoying to a community, batteries tend to be the least offensive. In the case of wind, it's taller, more unsightly. In the case of expanding the substation or building additional transmission lines, more land usage, taller. Solar, as we mentioned before, just like a gazillion acres are required for that. And when it comes to fossil fuel plants or nuclear, things like that, there does tend to be a lot of opposition because they're very tall. Sometimes they're noisy depending on how often they run, and there are air emissions that come from them. And so what we did is we identified Coventry as a specific substation. We talked about earlier, you can think of it as like an intersection of multiple highways within the state of Michigan that had a need, and that's why we put the project there. We definitely analyzed the new substation over by the landfill, as well as all the other lines that go through Salem, or frankly, the entire state of Michigan and the entire United States, and this was chosen to fix that need.
And then quickly, because we need to get started with our planning commission questions, the RFA conflict of interest and reliability.
So one thing I would say is, Fire and Risk Alliance is one of like 4 firms that do this nationwide, and several of their people sit on the code committees that dictate our requirements nationwide for our energy storage system. So without a doubt, like their bona fides are not in question, but you're 100% right. We paid them, and even though there are professional engineers over there that have ethics associated with what they put their stamp on, nonetheless, that can be perceived as a conflict of interest. Stantec is one of the world's largest engineering firms, and you were lucky to have this gentleman here that acts as your city engineer, but he has access to thousands of engineers on staff that are equally as big of experts on all of this. I will say that this is not a typical situation. You guys are very lucky to have access to a local face that shows up every single time from Stantec, but has the resources of a worldwide engineering firm. And so for everything we put forward, whether it's sound, fire protection engineering, civil engineering, structural engineering, mechanical, electrical, there's a person at Stantec that is reviewing our documentation both now and when we ultimately submit our building permit to vet that.
Prove reliability. Is that what you want to say? Prove reliability? Is that what your party?
I'm just trying to understand, how this math shakes out, because we hear these claims of improving reliability and affordability and all of that, but I'm not really understanding how a battery storage facility does that when the main issues we have are related to residential transmission.
Sure.
It's a different issue, but.
Yeah, 100% different issue. And so without a doubt, the number one cause of outages on the distribution grid, so those are the lines that go to homes and businesses, is trees going down and things like that. And to the extent that that tree goes down on a distribution line between our battery and your home, without a doubt, we are not going to improve that. However, the transmission grid is one gigantic interconnected machine. And Michigan is on what's known as the Eastern Interconnection, where basically from Kansas on east, with the exclusion of Texas, because they always want the ability to secede from the Union, so they have their own grid, all of that is one gigantic machine. And so if you think of your house as a sink or a user of electricity and a power plant as the source of that electricity, and the line goes down in the middle, and for transmission lines, it's somewhat rare that it happens because of a tree, just because the utilities are pretty good about tree clearing, but it's usually some other reason. So if that goes down and our battery is in between where the grid went down and your house, we can increase the reliability in those instances. So without a doubt, we won't help if the trees go down on the local lines, but for the national scale issues, it increases the reliability there. I would also say that reliability is not just a local thing, but it's also a Michigan and a regional and a country thing. We spoke about this a little bit at the commission earlier, but Michigan is an amazing place. I grew up not super far from here in northern Illinois, and I used to go to Michigan as a kid, and I know how amazing the state is. Unfortunately, as beautiful as the lakes are, they have caused it to be an electrical and a physical peninsula. And so what that means is it's really hard to get natural gas in and out of the state, and it's really hard to get electricity in and out of the state because there's only so many paths around the two lakes to get transmission lines and gas lines in and out. And so what that means is for Michigan to have a grid that is every bit as reliable as the rest of the Midwest or the rest of the Eastern Interconnection like we talked about earlier, you need to keep more of the energy you make in Michigan within Michigan. And what that means is that a battery that can charge when Michigan has excess energy and discharge when it, charge when it has excess energy and discharge when there's not enough energy, can keep more of it on that peninsula. So batteries are pretty useful all over the United States, and the problems they solve can be different. The reason why they're kind of having a moment here in Michigan is because of retiring power plants for which there's no viable way to kind of replace what was there, and just the peninsula nature where it's really hard to get new resources or new electricity in and out of the state.
Thank you.
Yep.
Magic, you're a fact checker. Everything good?
Yeah, thanks.
Nothing different?
We're good.
So we're not lucky to have these guys. We are fortunate to have these guys. You know, some people, the dump is a whole nother issue in talking about money coming in. This is money comes in. This allows us to have experts on staff that are looking out for our community, for our best interest. And I can tell you from my own personal experience in putting a project through another township and seeing what they have to work with, they don't have the attorneys, they don't have the planners. It's all just depending upon your neighbors. Not that that's a bad thing, but you can only imagine. It's like to try to work something out is to have professionals in your back pocket. So thank you guys. Okay, so now we're going to move on and we're going to move this along fairly quickly. So Paul, I'm going to read these letters, right, from the neighbors. So we can enter them into the record. And two of them are long.
And there's the third letter that's
And then two of them are short. Okay.
There was an additional one that was already in the packet.
Yes. So I don't have to read that one?
No, you do.
Oh, good.
No, you do.
Oh, I do. Okay. No, I got it. I got it.
But it's
I
four.
planned it. I
It's
got four.
Okay, good.
So, this is, I don't know who this is from. Dear Salem Township officials, I live right down on Joy Road near the proposed Key Capture Energy Project. I wanted to take a moment to express my support for this project. I've known Howard for a very long time. I knew his mother for a long time. To me, supporting this project is about supporting a neighbor's right to use his land to secure his future. All of his land besides those 10 acres is closed off for development. We did talk about that. On top of that, it makes good sense to utilize new technology that helps us be self-reliant and practical with our resources. It's a win for Howard, a win for being more resourceful with our energy. Thank you. Something that starts with a J, has a middle D, and maybe ends with an N or an R for the last name. Salem Township. The lady typed her name. Thank you. This is from Connie Melton to Salem Township. My name is Connie, and I'm a neighbor to the proposed Key Capture Energy Project on Joy Road here in Salem Township. I am writing to let you know that I'm okay with this project moving forward. My main reason for supporting this is my neighbor Howard. I want nothing more than to see Howard get his farm in good working order and see it make it to that 100-year milestone. This project gives him the opportunity to do just that. Howard has an opportunity to have a content life, and if this project helps him in his family farm, he has my backing. Thank you for your time and consideration of my point of view. Sincerely, Constance Melton. Okay, this one is from, hello, this is from G. Craig Wood on Joy Road, 6850 East Joy Road. Hello, Miss Alexander. I am writing regarding the proposed battery storage facility project to be situated at 6709 Joy Road, Salem Township. I appreciate receiving a notice of the proposition via mail and understand that there's a public hearing scheduled on May 18, 2026. Unfortunately, I must travel for work that day and cannot attend the meeting in person. Therefore, I'm writing to document my concerns about the proposed project. Our family resides at 6850 East Joy Road, Superior Township. The proposed facility would be just north of our property. I suspect we would have a direct line of sight to the facility if it were to be constructed. We received a brochure from KCE. There is no site plan indicating exactly how the facility would be situated. It may be too close to our property and diminish our value of land. 2, the KCE brochure indicates the state does not require any visual screening, but they, KCE, may provide visual screening. I feel strongly that visual screening is necessary if the project were to proceed. I have concerns about the elevations of the proposed equipment. It appears the heights of the equipment shown in KCE brochure exceed the heights of the perimeter fencing depicted. The appearance of BESS equipment is unsightly and inconsistent with the natural landscape we currently enjoy. The images in the KCE brochure depict mature trees as a form of visual screening. I would be surprised if the project were to provide mature trees. If constructed, surrounding neighbors would likely be looking at small immature trees in front of unsightly industrial humming battery equipment and electrical gear. Sound transmission concerns. The brochure states it would meet standards to limit noise decibels to 55 dBA or less when measured adjacent to the nearest dwelling. This implies the facility is emitting rather high dBA levels. We are concerned that the facility will be disruptive to the surrounding areas and audible from our home. I would think that if the project were to proceed, the more aggressive approach to sound transmission mitigation should be implemented, such as constructing berms with earthwork to reduce the potential acoustic impact to neighbors and wildlife. Additionally, this technique of constructing berms would serve as better, more enhanced visual screen. In review of the KCE brochure, it lists monitoring, in quotes, and automated controls connected to a BMS. There is no mention of a fire suppression system. What douses a fire if it were to occur? Is it solely a response from the fire department? My understanding is LFP batteries burn at very high temperatures and can emit dangerous fumes. It seems a more robust fire suppression strategy would be required. Dark sky requirements. In review of the KCE brochure, there are images of a facility fully illuminated. Our community is in a green belt. In fact, Superior Township has purchased development rights to ensure that agriculture will persist for many years to come. This type of industrial facility is not consistent with that theme. We are concerned about the amount of light pollution contributed to our natural surroundings. This issue is just one more factor that will upset the natural habitat of the well-established wildlife in our green belt. For the reasons noted above, we are not in favor of the proposed facility. If somehow it does become a reality, I kindly request that the plan group take into consideration the suggestions listed above to mitigate the unsightly impact of this industrial facility placed into our natural setting. Please do not reply to this email confirming receipt. I'm hoping that these concerns are shared with the planning committee. Thank you, E.G. Craigwood, 6850 East Joy Road, Ann Arbor. One more. This one is from Mr. DeForest. My name is Howard DeForest, and I'm writing to you as the landowner leasing a bit of my land on Tower Road across from the substation to Key Capture Energy. I know you all are working with the company, but I thought you should know more about why I signed up for this and what it means to me. I have lived on my family's farm here in Salem since the day I was born. I'm 54 years old now, and most of you know this land has been my mother and then my father's family name for a long time. My mother has lived right here in the farmhouse since 1940. She even served on the planning commission at one point. She passed away last spring. I'm doing my level best to keep things going. I'll be honest with you, it hasn't been easy. When I lost my mom, I didn't just lose her, I lost a person who kept it all together. I've been living off what I have saved, just trying to figure out where I fit in and how to handle everything. There's been times when I've struggled, and I know I've got a lot of work to do to get this place looking the way it should. It feels like I'm a 50-something years old, and all of a sudden I have to learn how to be the head of the household. It's a lot I have to adjust to since I spent my whole life just working the dirt and tending the cows. I'm asking for your support on this battery project because it's the only way I see to keep this farm in my name. I have a dream that I think about every day. In the year 2042, this farm is going to be a centennial farm. That's only 14 years away. I want to be standing here when that day comes as a third-generation owner, and I want Salem to be proud to have another 100-year-old farm in the community. And the earnings from this project will help me get there. I am all in on this farming life. This is what I know and how I want to spend the rest of my days. I just spent thousands of dollars fixing my tractor so I can keep working, and I'm still out there tending my cows and turning my crops. Last month I started planting fruit trees for an orchard because I'm investing in the property with all that I have. This project is what's going to let me put a proper roof on the farmhouse, fix the barn, and pay for my own health insurance. I want to make an important point about where this is going. I own more acreage than just this, but every single bit of it, except for these 10 acres where I where they would put the project is already in permanent conservation. That means there will never be houses or big developments there. It can only ever be used for farming, and that is exactly what I plan to keep doing, whether I'm working it myself or renting it out to other farmers. These specific 10 acres are right across from the existing substation, so it's the only spot that makes sense. By using this small piece of land for the project, I'm able to save the rest of the farm forever. Key Capture is not the only company who wants that land. I get letters and people stopping by all the time because right across the street from the substation, they want that spot. I love Salem and I love that we are a farming town. I'm just a man trying to do right by his mother and the land he was born on. I went out and got a job, I'm running the farm, I'm putting in hard work, doing my best. This project gives me the chance to fix up my life, fix my home, and make sure the DeForest family is still here in 2042. I hope you can understand why this means so much to my future. Sincerely, Howard DeForest, 6709 East Joy Road, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Okay. Mike, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate you guys coming in, taking the time to speak with us. As Pam said, I do live in the area. I live off Spring Meadow. And the biggest question for me is just, is it safe, right? Is the water going to be safe because it's well water? The air, soil, noise, so a few of my questions are this, and I don't know if I want to just ask the questions and then have them respond in kind, or I'll just ask the questions. With the noise test, was there already noise being put out by the substation? And does your noise test take into account the substation noise in combination with the noise that this new substation is going to emit? Second thing is
It would it be easier if we did them one at a time.
Sure.
Yeah,
Great.
My memory won't be that good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when you do noise studies and when you do noise testing, you measure background, ambient, and the addition. The way that is done after the project is you measure what is there with the batteries turned off, then you turn them on full blast and you measure what they sound like afterwards, and that's how you figure out that difference.
Okay.
Can I jump in on a question, because this is like the third time this has come up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is full blast necessarily the worst case scenario?
It is.
You've done a frequency sweep of it at all different rates, and you know what these look like?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's interesting.
And for the audience, I'm an automotive guy. Sometimes at idle, the car makes a lot more noise, so when you're,
Yeah.
2,500 RPM going down the highway, completely different noises. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in what the frequency
It's a good question, but we are more than happy to add testing at partial power out there. It is something that has been requested at the past, and like Bart, it's a good question just because we actually rarely operate at 100%. The average tends to be about 35%, and so we're happy to do it at whatever increments you'd like us to measure it at.
I think it would be great to know that information for future projects and do the whole suite.
Yeah.
And 52 dB, is that incremental to the other substation, or that is total?
So it's a dBA, which is absolute.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Second, again, under this umbrella, of is it safe and for water? And a lot of the assumptions and scenarios sounded like kind of best case scenario assumptions. I understand if there was a fire that we're not going in spraying water, and that we do have some type of membrane at some level around the different houses or the housing for these batteries. But what if it's raining, right? If it rains, now we're talking worst case scenario, because now we have a situation where we're throwing water on something that shouldn't have water on it, and then now we're rolling past those membranes, and then we're talking about drinking water. And I don't know how this works, and so this is my questions to you. We live off wells, so is there any potential that what could happen from a safety standpoint, for me and my kids, family, that if it's a storm, which stuff typically happens during storms, you have runoff from one of these, these catastrophic fires. could they hit a level of our drinking water, and where it hits down, I know it's 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 feet away from Spring Meadow or whatever the different distances are, could that infiltrate our drinking water? I don't know if you know that answer, but that's
Sure.
my concern.
So I think there's two elements to the question. So Mike, I can talk about like what would be in rain or fire water if it was applied. And then ERM can kind of talk about where the water goes, which would be no different whether the water is, has constituents in it or is not, right? So we talked about fire water a little bit earlier, Mike, and the reason why we do that is we say like, listen, you're not supposed to apply water. But oh, by the way, in the past they have, and oh, by the way, it was a toxic chemistry, which we don't use, and oh, by the way, they measured that water and all the major incidents, and the state, the federal EPA, local fire department always sent it to lab because people wanted to know what was in that water, right? And so I think there's layers to the argument where you shouldn't apply water. When it was applied to toxic batteries, which we are not using, the heavy metal batteries, it still met EPA drinking water standards. So whether it is rain or, that would come in contact with the batteries, which we're talking about a 20-foot shipping container, right? So 8.5 feet by 20 feet of surface area, the rain would have to hit that, and that would be the runoff that, that extracts whatever extracts from the battery. That's going to be far less than in the past when they've applied high-pressure fire water to it, and you were just permeating all the interior surfaces of the energy storage system with battery and presumably getting more, contaminated water. But then that water still met drinking water standards, because even though it's contaminated, at the end of the day, there's a saying, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? And what the idea there is like the more volume of water, the more volume of air, if there is some kind of constituent in that water or that air, it gets diluted and it ends up still, in the case of this water, meeting EPA drinking water standards. So I think the main point there is that whether the water comes from rain or if somebody purposely or otherwise applies fire water, it won't be contaminated. Now, we can still talk about where the water goes, and Wayne, we addressed that a little bit, but if you have anything else you want to add, feel free.
Well, it picks up on what you're saying about the kind of the first flush. If you think of it from a fire perspective too, or a rainfall that you're mentioning, that first flush will still be contained on site within the basin. So there's 11,000 cubic feet of volume that's just going to stay there and reside. Now that's going to still infiltrate into the ground. But that infiltrates within about 72 hours. It takes about that amount of time to do that. If there is a case where you have a larger storm event that occurs, of course, then at that point, the water's going to be circulating. You're going to have much larger volume, so it kind of gets into that dilution state at that point. And at that point, that's when it starts to leave the site. But it's going to leave the site at a very slow rate at this point too, at 1.5 CFS. So for that to occur, it's going to be pretty slow, and it's going to be able to dilute at that point too. So, and again, just to clarify for those, again, I kind of gave a vague answer as to where it goes from here, but on the northeast corner, and it's a little bit easier to see it maybe on this one, but on the northeast corner where the second access is up there, there's an existing ditch there. It's referred to as a stream, but there's a culvert that actually goes underneath the road there over to the east side. And so that's where it all connects in through there, and actually it does tie into the area on the east side, in the east ditch. Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I certainly, appreciate the EPA and all their recommendations. I don't know if I would still drink EPA water. I think ours is a whole lot cleaner, just, being well water out here. Also, if there was a fire out there and there was water discharge from the first flush, I don't know if I can get a cup, get that water discharge, and then,
I certainly wouldn't either, Mike, right? But the data does stand for itself when it has been tested.
I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I just, from a drinking standpoint, to the flush rates, to the basin that we hope works perfectly, again, what you guys provide, and I understand why, is best case scenario assumptions. And we hope that's the case, right? But in the worst case scenarios, we live here. And so, our kids live here. My kids walk in the drainage ditches, right? I don't want to have any issues should there be a worst case scenario situation. So, I think there's more questions to be answered there with the water testing and kind of how that would work.
I'm going to keep tagging on to your questions if you don't mind. Please.
Yeah, also, you guys, Majid is here, right? And so he's tested a lot of things, so let's, no offense, but he's our guy. So, let's make sure we include him, because he's read all this and he's seen it. So, just a reminder.
We've talked about contaminants that are there with lithium ion. runoff.
And we only have till 10 o'clock.
From fires off Creek. What contaminants exist from a lithium iron phosphate fire runaway where whatever water is headed? What contaminants do you see in that water? What exists from the combustion?
So Evan, if you want to get more specific than this, feel free. When they've measured that fire water runoff, it very much resembles the fire water runoff from a structure fire. It's slightly alkaline, meaning slightly basic, and a lot of that tends to come from the ash. Evan, off the top of your head, if you're able to kind of like rattle off what is in that fire water for LFP versus like what we talked about for NMC, feel free. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but...
I didn't know that's not from my end.
Okay. What we can do is FRA does have a lot of data on this part.
So you don't know what contaminants are right now?
Not off the top of my head, Bart. It's 100% been measured, and we can provide a report to that effect. But no, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Just, you know, you're not promoting the technology, you're promoting the lithium iron. You're not promoting lithium ion, but we seem to know what in the lithium ion.
We do know what is in lithium iron phosphate. We'll provide data on that.
Okay.
Breakthrough Magid, I guess, you know.
Right.
Been part of that, because
Yes.
you guys are, from my understanding, you guys are gonna have a little bit more to talk about to make
100%,
sure
yeah.
we're all on the same page and everything like that. Okay. Do we want to do any more groundwater contaminants?
I just think there's a lot more questions to be answered with that. I'm not convinced that, you know, what we have in these best case scenario assumptions and these structures and, you know, how the runoff's gonna hit the basin and it's not gonna go past the membrane and it's not gonna seep down to our drinking well and it's not going to run north or run south to somebody else's. I mean, you know, we've all been hit with floods. We've all driven, you know, down Tower Road in the mud where water's going over the road and it's not doing what it should be doing and it travels ways it shouldn't be traveling. It's just, you know, even up with me with Wagner Creek, right?
Can we talk about calcium chloride killing our roadside plants?
Well, I mean, it's.
Not today.
We have Wagner Creek, right, who's well north, which I assume that this would not play any factor into, but, you know, it does run into the back of a lot of people's yards. And so that kind of bleeds into my, you know, third question. And, you know, we talked about, you know, property values. And again, I know you've ran these tests. You know, these tests weren't after catastrophic situations. These tests are best case scenario assumptions. And so again, I think we're coming in getting one side of the story. The other side of the story is we have a catastrophic situation, right? We have a situation where a container has had a complete meltdown. We've had a runoff, and this runoff, there was mistaking, you know, it went off a way it shouldn't have went off. There was major digging, there was news articles, and now we live in a toxic zone, a toxic situation. Now, you know, for me personally, I have a lot of property. So now I go to sell my property, and, you know, a quick search, you know, a quick Google search informs the, you know, potential buyers and the values of this catastrophic situation. So again, I think there's two sides of that coin. When you're talking about property values, I understand in a perfect world scenario, just like we have with the, you know, the energy site there. You know, it's been there. People know about it. And I would tend to agree with the case studies, but in a situation where we do have a fire, you know, I don't agree that there wouldn't be hit to our property values. So again, my questions and my reservations with this whole thing is just, is it safe, right? Is it safe? Is it safe for my kiddos to be walking around up and down Tower? You know, I ride go-karts up and down Tower. I mean, this is not something that we just, you know, just drive on to get the territorial. This is where we do life. And, you know, if there's not a best case scenario, you know, if there's a worst case scenario, how does that affect us? And I guess I'm not really feeling confident, I guess. In the,
Hey,
you know,
Mike, can I address that a little bit? So you've made reference to best case scenario several times. Whether it's the safety system design, the way the plume analysis was done, the way the sound analysis was done, the way drainage is designed, that is worst case scenario. I take your point on property values. Like, no, nobody has studied after the fires that have happened whether the property values are impacted, right? I don't know that somebody would do that study, right? But when it comes to every other aspect of this, where there's, you know, like a scientific or an engineering study that's done, it's absolutely done a worst case scenario.
with our drinking water, you know, how deep does it go? How quick, I know you mentioned it drops at a certain rate.
Yep.
Is that the considered rate all around the site? Is that the drainage ditch? Like, there's just so many questions. Once you start dumping or having toxic, and I understand what you're saying, that, you know, we've done testing. but, you know, every test is, you know, every test or scenario is different. You know, Tower Road in Salem Township has not been tested, you know, much like where these other tests have occurred at. And I know that that's not something that you guys can go out there and create a catastrophic situation to say, now we've tested it. But again, it's just cause for concern.
So, I was gonna say, just to jump in, so it sounds like, so we can kind of get through some of these questions, is that where is the water actually running? And do we even know? You know, so that, I mean, things aren't just general from the book and from the manual. The people that live out there said, oh, it runs this way, this, and we want to feel confident. They want to feel confident. We all want to feel confident that you guys know where this stuff is and where it's going, and then that Magit reviews it. So I see he's taking notes over there, and these are the guys that are going to help us. I mean, they're giving a lot of information. We are not their first place, but these are guys are who we expect to confirm and review and analysis.
And last thing here too, and these are all, you guys did a great job, but these are all the concerns that I have.
No, it's all good, Mike, we appreciate it.
You know, I understand, so I don't want to seem one-sided, but with the air quality and the plumes, right? Typical house fire, you know, I used to be in law enforcement, right? We go to a house fire and typically it lasts, I don't know, 1 to 12 hours. I'm sure you can sit there and, you know, give it something different. As I understand, these containment, you know, these containers could burn for longer than that. I've heard anywhere between 1 day, full day, up to 7 days of reoccurring fires over and over and over again. You know, if there's reoccurring fires and there's consistent downpour of rain, or there's more than one initial plume, or there's, you know, these containers, you know, typically have fire situations or issues when the battery life is getting, you know, run down, right? As I kind of understand it. And so,
not quite. So let's address that one by one, Mike. So the large catastrophic fires were when they used to put these things inside of buildings. They would pack them in like sardines. One of the reasons why the National Fire Protection Association kind of came up with what they call the size and separation criteria, which sets that spacing you talked about earlier in the setbacks, is to avoid that. Because we know that if we do have an issue, we want to limit it to like the smallest possible amount of stored energy. Because if you were to put all of this inside of one big building, when one battery catches fire, they all catch fire, right? So to put that in perspective, like the ones you've seen on TV, like the Gateway Fire in California, the Moss Landing incidents in California, they were all significantly larger than this project, and they were all in a single building, and that's why they burned for days. The other thing that is important here is that the reason why water doesn't put these battery fires out is because it's not oxygen and fuel mixing like a typical fire with the source of ignition that causes that flaming. The flaming is due to thermal runaway, which is a chemical reaction that can happen in the absence of oxygen. So if you take the oxygen away, the thermal runaway doesn't necessarily stop, right? And so that's why what we learned is that the water is not going to put it out, but what the water can do is it's cool down that chemical reaction. And when chemical reactions happen cooler, they take longer. And so in addition to those larger batteries being inside large buildings where when one battery caught fire, they all ended up catching fire, they also put a bunch of water on it. And in the case of the building, that actually can be the right thing to do. That's neither here nor there. But one reason we don't put water on the smaller unit size ones like we do in the 20-foot shipping containers is you're going to take an incident that could be over in 3 to 20 hours based off of what's typical for these 20-foot systems. And you could extend it out longer than that because you're cooling the reaction down and causing it to happen longer. So that's how we know that it's not going to be a massive catastrophic event, because we only have a 20-foot shipping container full of batteries with a big separation around it. And we don't apply water to it because we know that's how you get the energy expended as quickly as possible. Evan, is there anything you would add to that?
Yes, a few things. So talking about burn length, so structure fires, you're losing a lot more mass. You're getting larger particle size. You're having a lot more come off of that. When you talked about water before, like I can't name everything that's in the runoff water, but if you look at the runoff water from a structure fire, has that ever affected your property value? Your neighbor had a fire, it's not even considered. What's in a structure fire is the plume is very similar to what you're getting of a plume of this. It can almost be worse because you have more mass loss, you have larger particle size. So there are papers in the works right now that are coming out there in the state.
Which is worse? You said it can be worse. Which one's worse, the house fire or
the structure fire?
The structure fire.
Industrial structure fire, absolutely, you can get a lot more loss. You know, considering the size of these battery containers, and what we've seen, the data supports, you're not losing a whole container. First you have a module, and then you have a rack, and then you have a container. You have multiple racks. So these are designed to fail and stay within one module. So when we do our testing, we do large-scale testing. That's a worst-case scenario. We did one 2 months ago in Arizona. Maybe 3, I'm not sure in my case. But I was there, we lit a container on fire with a propane torch. We had a fully charged container, and there were containers around it that also had energy in, and it did not extend out of that one rack area. So a very small portion of that caught on fire, and it still stayed inside of a few modules. So we had a plume coming out, but there was a light gas smoke, and 90% of that smoke constituency is hydrogen, CO, and CO2. It's combustible gas, but it dissipates back into the atmosphere almost immediately. When we're talking about structure fires, much worse, like a heavy particle, but they are similar. So you do get worse stuff, and some of the nastiest stuff is your refrigerant and the plastics, and we have those in both structure fires and batteries. But the battery contains itself, and with the passive fire suppression systems, it'll usually stay to a much smaller area. In worst case scenarios, when we light it on fire with exterior energy or an overcharge, we get that. And then with the pH of water, we've done electric vehicle burns and internal combustion engine vehicle burns. And the EV, the electric vehicle burn, the pH was much closer to neutral than the internal combustion engine burn. So we already have these. Like, if you have car fires, then you have an EV fire. We found out the EV fire, the water runoff was tested. We do test the water runoff at large-scale testing. Not all of them, but it was done by the NFPA on the EV burn in Rockland and some of the large-scale testing that has been done. So it's more of the modeling, and the modeling that was done, I think Stantec can back this up. That is, they're looking at a full container going in a very short amount of time. That's not realistic. It is pushing the limits of not worst case scenario, like theoretically worse than worst case scenario.
Quick question, the plume studies that you guys are doing, what is the input for how much is actually burning? Is it a module, is it a rack, is it a full container, is it 4 containers, or is it every container on the tank?
Does he speak now? Yes. So there were 2 situations done, and they can't do every single variable. So they did a large-scale fire test, and that's what's required by UL 9540A and 855. They did a large-scale fire test, and they had 5 cell scales. So they give you that, and then they give you a full container. So you have a good portion of a module, and they go to full container. So you get both. So they did a smaller one, like probable, and that was a smoldering fire, and then you have post-flaming combustion, which changes the rate and what's coming out of that.
Yeah, so the idea there, Bart, is like, we do the large-scale fire test to see what is typical, we model that, and then we do the worst-case scenario that as soon as it all goes up.
Okay. I'd be really interested in what all those inputs are to scaling what is being studied.
Absolutely, and the engineers can speak to that. I think the memo.
It does go into that detail. Awesome.
Yeah, the reason we didn't, so we dealt with a lot of elements of the Stantec memo in detail tonight. The reason we didn't do this one is it's 3 pages and ultra esoteric, but like happy to have you see the back and forth on that because we did provide a response to it as well.
Would it be helpful to hear, do you think, helpful to hear from Jim if he has any questions or concerns just to kind of move this along? Because I think a lot of these things, Mike hasn't been here, so he's missed a lot, right? And it's all new to a lot of people. Do you think it would be helpful to comment from the fire chief about this? Because he's been included in a lot of the meetings with these guys with Magit and P-Capture.
So we worked with the PhD out of British Columbia, the doctorate, and her grad student on the modeling. There was not enough in the FRA report for us to validate the comments that they made. We asked for additional information on that. The report lists the chemical concern of highest concern is hydrogen fluoride, not hydrogen. So hydrogen fluoride, and then using EPA guidelines for what they call EAGLE values, which are basically values that they say that the public can be exposed to. There's a level that basically, if you're in that, it's what we call a hot zone, not really good for anybody to have a good survival rate. And then you have a warm zone that's a little bit of a less risk, and then you have the last level, which is your EAGLE, I believe it's 1 or 3, I can't remember which way it is. But anyhow, that last level is what the public would be evacuated in a fire. My friend from New York is correct. Every structure fire, including this place, if it caught on fire, the plastics would be a huge concern because it produces cyanide and gases like that. The runoffs, we have met many discussions. I work for the county hazmat team. I run in the entire county for every battery fire that's in this county, as well as sit on the state level for lithium batteries. So the basic courses, they've said, you just can't put it out. Once it goes in thermal runaway, it's going in thermal runaway. So putting the application of water is not solving a problem. It's making a problem. So the biggest concern we would have is isolating it to a single connex or a single container and letting it burn and just let it stay there. It's got some suppression that they talked about, some internal suppression. We would have the request for some fire water in our design because what we'd be concerned about is maybe a brush fire coming towards there, so we'd want to be able to put that out. Or if they did, for some case, have a worst case scenario where the fire was really going, we want to make sure the adjacent containers didn't go and then the next one and the next one wouldn't go. So we would actually provide some protective cooling to the neighboring ones, but as far as suppression, you can go back and look at all the 100 fires that have occurred across the country and across the world, and not a single one's ever been put out with water. So application of water, and then the other thing that you have to think about, this is high voltage. So do I really want to go put some water on high voltage? I wouldn't, in the substation that's adjacent to it, whether it's the ITC substation, which is a high voltage, and then the Edison voltage, we're not going in there putting water in there. It's just not like a long living objective in firefighting to put water on electrical stuff. So as designed in there, they can remotely identify it. And our goal would be to keep it isolated to that one unit if you do have a problem. Our application of water would be strictly to prevent the fire from spreading from container to container, or preventing a fire, say there was a brush fire, which is probably coming right into the season for that now, to mitigate that before it got there. So the Stantec engineers and I wrote that memo and asked for additional information. I have not seen the rebuttal back to that. We request that the EGLE or EPA guidelines be used, which significantly pushes out those receptors, but in the same sense as my colleague from New York says, very remote happening. It'd be like a house fire. Thermal plumes, especially in fire conditions, react very different than modeling. Modeling is trying to predict what would happen. You have to incorporate our unusual weather, the aspect of the rural conditions in there, because high rise and the land can affect how it goes. So at the end of the day, what we would do if there was a fire, we would actually go out there with direct instruments and make a safety zone around it, evacuate if necessary, if it was any public, and our prevailing winds are also, quite frankly, to the northeast, if I remember, northeast, if I remember right. But I would like the FRA study to go back with our comments and update us so that we can go back and look at it critically with what we've asked them to use as new targets based on the EPA standards. There's been a lot of talk about, water contamination and stuff like that. We're residents too. Every one of us come in here, so we all are on wells. So to your point, we would be very concerned about any of this aspect of the groundwater contaminating, because that's where we're getting our drinking water from. And as you know, it's pretty rural, so there's not a lot of water. So all that water would have to be trucked in to fight a fire. But at the end of the day, the FRA study, I will say a couple things. NFPA, the 800 standards, UL standards are behind the times. The technology is always emerging, coming out with better and better stuff. One of the things that I've asked the key capture is, which is the exact connex that you're going to use, and they won't know that until they're ready to build, because they're always coming out with newer and newer stuff, better and better stuff. So that's where we're at with it. The report has some stuff that we've asked, and the memo I think that we wrote is in the package. But we'll defer until we get the replies back and provide additional information to the Planning Commission if they so requested. Is there any questions that I missed, or was that? I mean, that's high level. There's a lot of science behind this stuff, and I don't want to get too detailed in it.
So I can just say that we're not going to have public comment right now. We'll get towards the end. So save your questions. So he has been, and Madely's been all over this with all kinds of questions. So it's comforting to know that he's on it, so he's a great resource for us.
Yeah.
So call him anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chief, thank you. And I just look forward to, I guess reading more, seeing the back and forth. The biggest thing to me is it safe for water, air, soil, noise, those types of things. So,
And so, Jim, did you have, like, other than some of your questions, did you have any, I think, just to kind of get to the heart of it?
I would, yeah.
Any major questions or concerns with this project?
No, I would say like any other business, anytime we bring a business, there's always a risk to the community, right? This doesn't pose an undue risk for the area that it's in. It's in with your substations, you have your transformers, high voltage, you have high voltage electricity, you've got 10 acres, I think of this, they're proposing of this. The big thing is looking at the history, they do have the better battery technology, made this happen 5 or 10 years earlier. We'd be looking at a whole different chemistry. I think they explained a lot of, hopefully, the technical details. I can assure you from the firefighting perspective, we're not going to put water on it. We would not do that. The only way we'd put water, again, is to prevent from a brush fire or the containers from going to another. There's just no value for us to try to put it out. They're going to lose it anyhow. They're going to write that one off.
I think Jim has been very aggressive in asking all the safety questions because that's what he does. So,
Thanks, Pam.
yeah. Okay. Is there a different area of topic? Because it sounds like there needs to be some additional collaboration. Is there a different area of topic? Brian, do you have any questions that's a little bit different that we can?
Yeah, so it's been suggested to me that I can't keep playing I'm the new guy card. But
you got a little bit more.
I'm 3 months on this board, and this has been a long, ongoing process. So I apologize if this has already been asked and answered. But does Key Capture Energy have any up and running best facilities that, similar scale, let's say, to what you're planning here, that we could visit, tour as locals?
You can come to any of our 14 operational projects. We'd be happy to have you. There's also several others operating in Michigan that are not dissimilar from what we're proposing. And so if you want to see something here more locally that doesn't require a plane flight, we could try and arrange that as well. They are our competitors, so they might say no, but some of them are our frenemies, so we might be able to pull it off.
Okay. You work through Paul probably on that, because this would be the first one in Michigan, right?
No, not at all. No.
Oh, this is
Not by a long shot. First one for Key Capture, yeah.
For you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can take you to one locally, or you're welcome to any of the other 14. So.
Are those lithium ion?
Yes, all of them are lithium ion. Oh, you're talking about like NMs. So
The
just
battery technology is lithium ion or lithium iron?
okay. Just for clarity,
Yeah.
NMC and LFP are both lithium ion. NMC is a different cathode from LFP, but they're both lithium ion. So our 13 of those 14 projects are lithium iron phosphate. One is nickel manganese cobalt.
Okay, thank you.
Joel, I wonder if you couldn't provide us some addresses for those, and then we could just share those with the planning commissioners.
Yep, no problem.
No, that was my question.
Kevin, did you
That'd
have
be very helpful.
Yep. And Brian and Mike and I think Bart, so I think, I don't know if all three of you, I know Bart, you came at the end of the Energy Storage 101 presentation. There is a lot of pictures of our operational sites in there. So we can get you a copy of that to the extent it's not handy. I think it might be on the website too, I don't know. But in any case, we can get that to you. It has a ton of photos of our operational projects. And Mike, there's gazillions of slides that extensively address kind of all the stuff you were asking. But I know you guys weren't able to make that, so we can make that available so you can kind of take a look at that.
Well, I have seen a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
I think just physically being there.
Yeah, for sure.
For what it's worth, I'd be interested in understanding the age of each of these facilities.
Mm-hmm.
How long they've been in operation. Because we're talking about a 10-year to a changeover of a cell. We're thinking about 10 years for a changeover of cells. So if these have gone through changeovers, and maybe that'd be great if we're still fruitful.
What do you mean by a changeover, Bart? I'm not familiar with that term.
Cell module, we have module, rack, and whole container, right? So one however many volt unit before it's strung together in parallel or series, whatever, have gone through changeovers on those that can sort of run a battery to its.
Oh, okay. Our oldest facility is 2019, and it has not gone through a changeover, and it's expected to have another 10 years useful life. The energy storage batteries have a significantly longer EV life, because the memory search part, I think you had a little bit of EV experience, right, at some point? Okay, so the duty cycle on a stationary energy storage battery and an EV are completely different. The EV duty cycle is way more onerous. So our batteries, our oldest ones have a useful life of 20 years. The ones that we're deploying now have a useful life of 25 years. And that's just a function of improvements to cycle life and different cycling versus EV, as well as better calendar life.
You guys, unlike Lightwork, can control the charge and discharge rate, which is nice.
Yeah, 100%. And to your point, given your subject matter expertise part, the vast majority of the time it's not 100%, which causes accelerated degradation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got some. This Pam was reading Howard's letter. It's exactly, we've met with these gentlemen or this company for, seems like a couple of years now. Back and forth. Everybody has done 3-4 presentations already. In Howard's letter, that is part of the reason why, too, we were doing the rural use zoning, too, because he wants to save his farm. And if this is a way for him to save it, we need to look at it. We take the farmers in this community very seriously. But we do need to look at Howard's letter and ask, you know, can this help save his farm? Maybe, maybe not. So we need to listen to these people too, and that's why we have for the last couple of years. And we are doing our homework. So, yeah, that's it.
Bart, did you have additional questions?
I've asked this before, but I think it'd be great if it was answered just for the sake of the audience.
Okay.
Brian, I think it was something you and I talked about, so hopefully the wires going out from this substation serve how much usage, how many homes or whatever? Oh gosh, in the millions and the hundreds of thousands and or, you know.
Yeah, so there's two 345 kV lines that run east to west that converge at Coventry, and then there's multiple 230 kV lines that also converge at Coventry. I don't know, Joel's an engineer, so he might have a better estimate here on the number.
Never trust an engineer.
Yeah, I agree. So I think when you're talking about serving, Bart, if you're talking about like the distribution lines that come out of that, I don't know. When it comes to the transmission lights, it's the entire state and beyond the state.
Where I'm going with this is, this battery station, this specific one on Tower Road, does it power Salem Township?
Yes.
It does.
You're talking about like...
That answer has changed.
Are you talking about like as an uninterruptible power supply where if everything gets cut off, it can just power Salem?
Somehow wires are still connected, whatever, and Salem has a blackout.
Mm-hmm.
Could someone walk up to this battery station,
No.
flip a switch, and power Salem? Okay.
So-
And that's not neither here nor there.
Yeah.
I just think it's of interest to the township.
Sure.
Okay. With what this battery station provides, where it's going, how quick that power is used up, in case of a blackout, how long could this battery station supply that same customer, you might say, with the power that it has in storage, saying you're 100%?
Sure. So, Bart, it's not an uninterruptible power supply, right? And then what you're describing is that where like one single power plant or one single battery can, as an island, power a group of homes. Like 1 in 100 power facilities is actually designed to do that. It's called black start islanding capability. It's just not something the grid's designed to do. The grid is designed to have a bunch of different facilities of different technologies and redundant power lines, both transmission and distribution, to deliver electricity to somebody's home. So I can certainly do the math of like how many customers are in Salem and the size of the battery, and if the battery was the only source that's powering Salem, how long would that last? But that's not what it's designed for, and it will never do that.
I understand it. There's confusion in, I saw it first, that's why I asked
Yeah.
the question is, what are the benefits you get out? You get better reliability. That's been said. Well, we don't get it from this, we get it in the general sense.
Right, and like Bart, during the Best 101 session, which I know you were able to come to the end, we talked about this extensively. What?
You guys love that.
No, my point is like.
Traveling, I got off a plane, was here half an hour after touching.
Sorry, Bart, my point's not to like book you and I for missing it. My point is we did talk about this, and so I just want to recognize that like this is something we've addressed. We talked about reliability extensively, and we told all the commissioners that like we are not claiming that this battery is improving the individual reliability of any customer and say that.
That's what I wanted to add. Yeah, I'm not worried about having, my card was out 30 seconds later, I got a generator.
Yeah, I remember that.
To keep AC, freezers, fridge, whatever.
Yeah.
So, okay, and now there was one more that was on top of that. Oh, this is fun, permit me with this. How do you connect the battery station to the substation?
With a line that goes across the road?
Wires.
Yes.
Okay. If those wires were 5 times longer, other than paying for those wires, would it be detrimental voltage, current loss, whatever going between the?
Detrimental but de minimis.
Okay. So across the street, that answers the question of how much it costs to attach. That is, making your, the words you guys use were, project would be successful because of the infrastructure you have to invest in. It's nice because you jump 100 yards and you're there. So 4 miles away, and maybe a place that could be a little bit better, a little bit more suggested, a little bit more reasonable to the township. Basically, could we say the only difference would be paying for the infrastructure to connect those two, run the wires between?
We wouldn't be able to. Yeah, it's more than that. So if we were to connect to Coventry substation, but with a 4-mile line, the way that it's studied, like that's fine. The problem is there's no way we get 4 miles of right-of-way and easements to do that over that many landowners' homes. If we were to connect 4 miles away on existing transmission lines, no, then the project would lose its economic benefit. Because it has to do with all the lines crossing over in one place, Bart, and having access to those versus if we're away, it's not as valuable. The other thing is that requires a line tap, which means we have to build a whole new substation, so.
Okay? So far?
And can I make a motion to extend this meeting 15 minutes only, so we can get through the balance of our stuff, our normal things?
I think that would be good. Okay. All those in favor of extending the meeting 15 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, we're still
End
meeting.
at 9:30.
Okay, I had a couple of things I just wanted to point out. In the planner's report, the energy store, there was something about the dark skies, that's gonna be addressed. So it's not gonna, you'll see, if, Brian, if you're gonna look at those pictures, all those pictures, one of them has this beautiful at night, and it's like shining up all over the place, and yeah.
Our marketing department got carried away and he likes the picture. We never do that.
Yeah.
I think you guys need to take that out of your package.
They understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see, the noise, Paul, I was surprised that our noise ordinance went right to the house. I thought it was always at the property line.
So
The
this-
decibel rating was at the property line and not the building.
Typically it is. This is based on our compatible renewable energy ordinance that was passed a couple of years ago that is based on.
So it's a
this-
state thing.
The state law.
Okay, we're gonna move right on.
PA 232.
Got it. Okay, you guys addressed a lot of the things in your 45 minutes with what's in here, so that's cool. The maps, the driveways, blah, blah, blah. Barbed wire, we didn't talk about that. I'm gonna move on, no past that. There was some discrepancy in the height of the containers. Are you guys gonna be on that? Like, if it, one says 8, one might say 9 or something like that, because that impacts the screening and stuff like that. So there's just a discrepancy, right? Okay. 9.5. So which one is it? Do we know?
9.5, yeah. ISO containers come in standard and high Q. One's 8.5, one's 9.5. We just go with the wrong one.
Has it always been 9.5, or was it something, did that change?
You can buy both, but what did we have in the application?
I was just wondering what
It's
the
always-
application was.
Yeah, it's always been sold 8.3, it's always been 9.5. The
yeah.
number has just been wrong.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
You guys are gonna get together with fire chief and Madget and straighten out whatever needs to come in. Okay, that's containers, hold on. So there's, one of the things, Majid, it says, or Chief Rockwell, about engaged in, township engineers and fire chief are engaged in plumb analysis to evaluate concerns from potential fires, previously discuss the lighting plan, blah, 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 hold on. It says something about, there's a renewable training, right? There's some sort of renewable training or training that will reoccur. Is that part of the plan, or is that something that we could request? Is that a Paul or a Magic question?
I think you could request that from what I remember.
Okay, so then when you talk about funding coming into the host agreement, that's something that would apply to that. Barbed wire. I think it's just, what is the risk to this project?
Sure.
Is barbed wire necessary? Is it everywhere else?
So barbed wire is prohibited in the zoning ordinance from fences, but the planning commission does have the ability to allow for it in certain circumstances if you determine that it is necessary for safety of a project. You have done this before.
Right.
I think
It was 8 miles somewhere over there, right?
There was a gas well
Yep.
on 7 Mile, I think, 8 Mile, yeah.
Do you guys have issues with this? Do you think that's something that?
The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, the federal government do. It's gotta be 7 feet tall, it has to have barbed wire, and that's
Okay.
not something we have an option on.
Okay,
So that's just something from the ordinance that you all have to
okay, well, add it to the list.
agree to. Yep.
Yeah.
Please. Okay, this is what I was seeing, fire response and emergency plans are required to be produced and updated every 3 years by the applicant. Who ensures compliance on that, to make sure we don't drop it?
So, I don't want to put Jim on the spot, but
Yeah, that would be us as a commercial, we could require that.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I'm going fast.
Don't be sorry.
Okay, those are all my questions so far that I have up now. I think, did anybody else have any questions? I know there's still unknown and people have questions, but I think as of now, we're generally supposed to stop at 10, we move 10:15. I still think there's a little bit of, there's some collaboration that needs to take place.
Yep.
I hope all of you have learned quite a bit. I know it's a lot at
Ask
once.
your questions.
We've heard it multiple times. And there's, I'm fairly comfortable with the whole process and what they're doing. Them working with us is appreciated. It's been going on for a long time, but I think I mentioned to Brian, it wasn't, and Joel, that just, it was a few months ago, we never really had anything come back. Like,
Yeah.
there wasn't enough information. Quite frankly, I think getting past where the technology has improved, that's a bonus for all of us, so, sorry, but it's a long process, so. I still think there's nothing more important than the safety of our citizens, and it all comes back to, we care about the wildlife, I think we got that taken care of, but it's the air, the soil, the drinking water. There's nothing more important than our drinking water, so that needs to be really tightened up or taken seriously. That's really important to us. But I think that we're not ready to address this quite yet. Maybe we can postpone this until things get tightened up. What do you guys think? Gives you another chance to go through maybe another 150 pages, 300 pages again, just to make sure you've
Well,
gotten it,
I
right?
think we need to hear more from Stantec, let them finish.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, we're hearing the details and the understanding, but these are the guys,
Yep.
Ed and Majid and Chief Rockwell and Paul, all, they've got our back, so.
Okay, make a motion to postpone action on conditional land use and site plan for Key Capture Energy located at 6709 East Troy Road until such time as the applicant has addressed the outstanding comments in the planner's report dated 4/20/26, the engineer's report dated 5/8/26.
Second.
Okay, Mike, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Bennett?
Yes?
Con? Yes. Frost?
Yes.
Huntsman, yes. Lewandowski?
Yes.
And Merlot?
Yes.
6 in favor.
Okay.
I have one quick question, point of order.
Can we do it during, okay, go ahead.
Just a minute, sorry, just to clarify. The public hearing though concluded, we're just adjourning for, taking action on another meeting. Just a point of clarification, whether it's a continued public hearing or the public hearing is concluded, and we're just.
No, my understanding, the public hearing is concluded tonight,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, that's all I wanted.
One of the
Thank you.
shortest ones we had.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay, we will move on. Let's see, old business items, none, reports of commissioners and correspondence. Let's see, Board of Trustees, TJ, is unavailable today. Land preservation and conservation. Next month? Okay, thank you. Planning consultant.
You have our monthly report
Yes.
in front of you.
Mike, this is probably new for you. Okay.
No. Permits are on the uptick. It's that time of year when people are doing more stuff. Of note, with the current planning projects.
Excuse me, could we keep, we've got a little bit more meeting to go. We're almost done. Thank you for coming.
Of probably note here is the Red Barn project, that is the old Edith's Market gas station. We have seen a significant submittal on that one. It's probably the best site plan I've seen on that property since people started working on it.
Yes.
Maybe 6 or 8 years ago. We did turn around some reports for them, so I'm expecting them to come back. We'll be likely setting up a public hearing for the special land use for that in the coming meetings.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes, April 20th, 2026.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of April 20th, 2026 as submitted.
A second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes for April 20th, 2026, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Public comment. Any public comment? Okay, none.
Just to clarify the next date, planning commission, is a team.
The third, what is it, the second Monday of the month? Third Monday of the month.
Third Monday, of June. Thank you.
You'd think I would know this by now, sorry. What's that? Nope.
I'll just ask them.
Okay. Are you sure? We've got like 6 minutes.
If you've got 6 minutes, I guess I'd kind of like to direct it to the fire chief, but I can direct it to
He's
Mr.
here.
Stanton.
He's here, he's still here.
I can.
Yeah, I'm here.
I guess the plume study said it was modeled on a worst-case scenario. And is one container a worst-case scenario? That seemed like a bad scenario, but maybe not the worst-case scenario. And I'd kind of be interested what you guys' thoughts were.
So I'm gonna just say I wasn't the subject matter expert on the plume study. Somebody else did that from our company in collaboration with the fire chief, and I think he can answer that one on both of us.
Yeah, the report wasn't clear in what they used for their criteria for endpoints and worst-case scenarios. I can tell you, a Connex box is fairly a rigid container. It's like an elevator, if you will. concept of that completely going up and keeping to that container is a reasonable assumption. One of the questions I had asked Brian was, what's the separation distances between the containers? Because what we would be concerned about, if they were too close, that they could, the convection waves would actually heat that and cause that. I've been told that they're, I think it was 8 feet? 10 feet. 10 feet is more than enough that I feel comfortable that the adjacent container.
They're
would
not gonna propagate,
But-
and
And we
therefore,
would be able to put a remote monitor in there and actually cool it down, just like if you had a neighbor's house, especially if you go like in the city, houses are close to each
Yeah.
other, we would protect that other house that was not on fire to keep it from catching fire.
all right, and one follow-up on that would be, in the event of this worst-case scenario, a fire at the site, who's gonna do the air monitoring while the fire's going on?
So we would do that both locally in the county hazmat team with the conjunction once the responsible party got on scene. I understand it's a non-manned site, so we would be the first jurisdiction, and one of the things that after reading the risk report, we are going to ask for a monitor, directly monitors.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just one bullet point that it went over quickly, but we've agreed to buy that equipment.
Okay, yeah, because, that's the, hydrogen fluoride's pretty nasty stuff, and we're not directly upwind from it, but we're to the side.
So this is where the
and
model
it'd be
gets
nice
in,
to-
so when things like that get into a thermal column, they tend to go up.
Yeah,
And so, the neighbor that's closest, generally is not always at the most risk.
right.
It's downwind
Yeah.
and fallout, so, we've asked, and we would ask for monitors to directly do that. So we wanna make sure that we were keeping the public safe in the areas that we said are safe to go, and the ones that were hazardous, we can actually measure.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, quick.
For the fire chief as well. Back there. In the scenario where you're spraying water on neighboring containers to cool them down, we don't have city water out there or anything, we're wells.
Correct.
So the only water is how much you can truck it in.
Correct.
Is that gonna be enough?
So we've asked, and the site has agreed to put a 30,000 gallon, I believe?
25.
Thank you. 25,000 gallon water tank at the site. We have 6,000 gallons sitting in our station here, and we have mutual aid with our partners because we practice this on a regular basis for structure fires with them and us. So I'm fairly confident that we could manage any type of incident with the water that we have, the existing water on site, and then our partners of Superior, Ann Arbor Township, Northfield, and et cetera, that would come to our assistance with shuttling water out there, suppressing the fire.
Are there not water lines nearby that you could put a hydrant next to?
Eventually, we'll have that Copperson corridor built. Right now, nothing in the township has fire hydrants.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? They're comments. None? Okay, thank you. Chairperson comment. Just one. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your interest, your concern, your patience, your kindness, your willing to listen. It really helps things move along, and it makes a more a sincere dialogue with everyone. Thank you guys for coming prepared. Can't believe we didn't answer all their questions. But no, I think they've got all of them, and you've and your patience as well, because you've answered them multiple times. But we appreciate it. It's important to us. So their first one. So that's it. Thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll continue to come and be participating in more of our Planning Commission opportunities and projects here. Third Monday of the month. Adjournment 10:14. Right on time.
Yeah, right on time.
You're gonna be late.
Sure.